Welcome to Cake with Kersi. I am your host, Kersi, along with KINETIC.
Hey,
Hello, hello.
what's up? Happy week, happy Tuesday.
And happy anniversary, darling.
That's 1 year, right? I was waiting for you to say it. Congratulations.
I know.
Been a journey, right?
It has been, and we'll take a trip down memory lane a little later. But I really don't want to waste any time. I know we do our usual chit chat, and we'll get to that people a little later. But definitely want to get to our very special guest that we have joining us tonight, Mr. Knia Singh. Hello.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Oh no, thank you for making the time to join us. We know you're a very busy man with a lot on your plate, so we want to see uh, talk about as much as we can tonight while we have you around. So thank you, thank you, thank you for accepting our invitation. Um,
My pleasure.
yeah. So first of all, the whole anniversary thing, I'll just bring you in so you don't feel totally clueless. We've been on air, so we've KINETIC and I have been um, bringing you Cake with Kersi, everybody that listens in. Thank you very much for that. We've been doing it for a little over a year now, but this is like the 1 year anniversary of the show. So, yeah, so and in the last few months or a couple of months since the beginning of this year, we've been bringing guests on, people that we find interesting, doing amazing things in the city or around the world. We had someone in actually call in from Brooklyn a couple weeks ago, and so we use this opportunity to highlight special people doing, like I said, amazing things. And so your name came up as someone that we definitely wanted to feature and find out more about, just with all that you do in and around Toronto. And yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, I mean, no one could do it better than you to introduce yourself to the people, let them know who you are in your own words.
Okay, well, I'm Knia Singh, also known as Mr. Knia, also known as George B. Singh, and born and raised in Toronto. Right now, I've just completed my law degree at Osgood, so I'm a juris doctor, and I'm just waiting for my call to the
Congrats.
bar.
Can I just congrats on that, because that's big. That's big. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's strange because it feels just like second nature because I've always been community oriented and doing public things from a young age. So it feels like just one big path. It doesn't feel like separate things. But when I step back and people congratulate me, I appreciate it because I realize, yeah, it takes a lot of effort to get to these positions in life. But at the same time, you just got to follow your heart and follow what you feel is right. So a lot of people know me in the city as a music producer, and I am still one, and I still love music. In 1993, I opened up a recording studio called CMP Studios, and I ended up recording quite a few artists across the city. I think probably one of the most trafficked studios in the history in the city, especially in hip hop, because the time when I opened, there wasn't computers running studio. It was, you had to have an analog board, you had to have a 4-track or 8-track recorder, you had to have ADAT, DAT machines. It was all analog. So you took a special skill set and you had to invest money. Nowadays, you can get a computer and a microphone, and well, you don't even need a microphone. You can just get a computer and you can run your whole
Yeah.
and that's it, right? So at that point, people were coming to my house up at Alton Towers in the basement, and was recording tons of people. By 1996, I had opened up a co-op placement for people because some of the artists I worked with said, hey, I'm finishing high school, but I want to do a co-op placement. I want to do it at your studio. Once I started doing that, excuse me, once I started doing that, the other district school boards started getting on board. So I was servicing the Peel region, Durham region, York region, East York, Scarborough, and this is all before amalgamation. And then that led to my path of being active in the community, advocating for a lot of these young people who were in my studio who had trouble with the law. I ended up showing up at court, speaking on their behalf because either the lawyers were taking advantage of them or they didn't understand the language being used or the way the system was working. And then I became an advocate for them. Shortly after that, I ran for political office in 1997 because I was interested in representing those who didn't have a voice. And that leads me up to my current political career as well now. But the legal stuff, I got a foundation from helping people on their everyday lives to being hired as a legal assistant by Louis Dallas, who was a artist in my studio, but then he was a teacher. He quit teaching, became a lawyer, and he opened up a practice in a firm and asked me to assist when he was expanding because of my knowledge of legal issues. And then he encouraged me, and I knew that I probably should get into post-secondary, because when I started my studio, I was only 19, and I'd only done one semester of college, and I stopped going to school. And then by the time I reached later on, I realized I had to turn that around and have some proof. Actually, it was my father's passing that basically said to me, you know what, your parents put you here on the earth. They've taken care of you. They've set you up. For me to go through life, have some brains and not utilize them and not be able to officially help people. Because when you're an advocate, that's fine. When you have knowledge, that's great. Like, I don't really think this education system should validate you. But at the same time, we are in a society that goes on credentials. And if you don't have those credentials, you're never taken seriously. So after my father's passing, I said, you know, all the knowledge I've collected over the years, everything that I've experienced, I want to be able to make a difference. And I know if I had a couple initials behind my name, that would make a difference. So I figured, okay, I applied to U of T as a mature student at the age of 37. I got in. And then I started realizing very quickly around being around all the younger students, I said, I'm going to have a bachelor degree at almost 40, and all these young 20-year-olds I'm going to be competing with for jobs. It doesn't make sense with all the experience I have. I said, I probably need something a little more substantial that can work for me. And that's when the whole law degree discussion came up with Louis Dallas from Dallas Criminal Defense, and just me knowing what would be best. And I applied to Osgood and I got in, which was great and rare because I did not have a bachelor degree when I applied, and they still accepted me based on all the life experience that I had running the studio, being the chair of Caravana, also, you know, being politically active. They realized, okay, well, this person may have something new to offer to the law school. And the rest is kind of public history, because once I got into law school, a lot of things were in the newspaper, on TV, and the whole carding debate was going on. And that's where we are now. So without telling all the story, I can let you ask me questions, but I know you asked for just a simple introduction, that it's hard sometimes when you follow the path. I don't want to leave anything out, but I'm definitely open to any type of questions to expand on any of those areas I touched on.
Thank you. No, actually, you made my life a whole lot easier, and then now you've limited me because actually, that's exactly what I want to do. When Kirsty and I were talking about our short list of of people that we wanted to speak to and interview and get to know, and we thought we should highlight what they're doing in the city, what they have been doing, and stuff of that nature. You kept on reoccurring. Like, I didn't know you personally, but your name preceded itself because of the circles we ran in. I've seen you around the way. We never really connected until shortly over a personal issue, I guess, matter or whatever it may be. But outside of that, you've always been a predominant figure, whether you said whether it's the Caravana community, your studio, everything that you've listed. And we said, at least I thought, this is, him needs to be highlighted, and we need to find out, who this guy is. And then when you started your political campaign, I was following that closely, and and it was just one of those things where, I was just like, this brother's very eloquently spoken. He advocates, like, his heart's in the right place. So that's why we brought you on the show. And now you basically ran through in 5 minutes who you are, and kind of left us at or me anyway, right?
No. You know what? That just gives an overview, and now you can dive into specifics. I can expand on subject.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was the whole idea. The idea was, basically, I just wanted to highlight your history, what basically you brought and mean to the city, things of that nature, like what drives you. So I guess we'll begin. Like, when you opened the studio at the age of 19, and you've highlighted the artists, what was your drive to begin that? Like, we'll start breaking down the steps of what build up me to to lawyer, to political career, and things of that nature, if you don't mind.
Not a problem. Okay, so I'll tell you. Growing up, I was a crazy hip hop head. I used to listen to Ron Nelson, Fantastic Voyage. back in the day, we didn't get black music in Toronto, so my parents would always have WBLK in the car. So I was exposed to Run DMC and Sugar Hill Gang and everything like that. But then one day when my friends at school, I must have been in grade 3 or 4, they're like, "Oh, there's this show Saturday afternoons. It's got hip hop." I'm like, "Really?" And then listen to that. So I became a hip hop junkie. I used to have a little breakdance crew with my friends and do all that stuff. But I always had an entrepreneurial mind at a young age because my father, he worked at a sheet metal factory, but they always had painters hats given by the paint companies that would
Have painter hats, yeah.
yeah. So you remember breakdancing, painters hats were big.
Yes.
So I used to get those, and then I distributed them to my crew, and then we would do the checkers on them and do all the graffiti on them. That was like my first step into, I guess, social organization, if you want to call it that. Um, Fast forward into high school, me and my friends, we used to dance. We used to watch the rap videos, and dancers, backup dancers were big in that day. What ended up happening is we did a couple talent shows, and then my friend, one of the dancers, his older sister knew a rapper, and that rapper saw us dance, and he said, "I want you guys as my backup dancers." So we joined. Before you knew it, we were in Indonesia touring because somebody seen us at one of the shows. Sorry. And this was in the day when I remember this conversation, and this will blow your mind, Kinetic. Starting from scratch, who I knew as Mark, turned to me and said, "I'm not sure what to call myself. I don't know if it should be scratch or starting from scratch." Right? And I was like, "Yeah, starting from scratch is cool." Like we were talking about that. So that was that era. From dancing, then I started realizing, I want to do more. I want to do more in the hip hop world. And so I wanted to get into the studio with the rappers that we were dancing for, but they would never bring me to the studio. And there came a point where I was just like, you know what? I understand this music biz. I'm good with equipment. I'm going to have to just get my own equipment. And basically, in a nutshell, kind of left the group per se, because I said I was going to do what I got to do. If you're not going to let me in the studio, I got to find my own path. And I started up a studio. And then because I was one of the first like commercial studios, hip hop studios, because there was Beat Factory and there was a couple others, it was hard. It wasn't hard. It was a good time to break through in the market. So once I started the studio, a lot of the guys in Scarborough, Monolith, Danny O, all those guys, YOK, they'd be coming to the studio. And then somebody down my street, Ruckus, we used to call him, he started telling people. Then the word just spread. "Oh, there's a studio in Scarborough. There's a studio in Scarborough." And then I was having people from Pickering all the way to Oakville, Newmarket, all the way to downtown coming there. And because I worked with people in a specific way, which wasn't about just money and it wasn't about just an image, it was really about the music, because I loved it. People kept coming. And it would really started off as me wanting to rap with my partner Shamari. We had Two Crazy Mental, and we wanted to, we were rapping. But then before you knew it, all the traffic that was coming took away my time to rap, and it became a recording studio. Then because of the volume, it became a record label. And one of the most popular guys, I guess, in Toronto rap world that people would know is Don Million. Don Million started coming to my studio in '94. And then throughout his career, we were working together very closely and got him to the point where he got the nomination for the Rap Video Award and the distribution deal, and worked with so many artists. So the motivation behind that was also seeing that when people were in the studio, they were staying away from crime. They were staying away from negative activities, and they were actually being productive. So I always made the studio a welcome place. I kept the rates really low. Like my first rates were $20 for 3 hours. That was back in '93, '94. And people appreciated the fact that it wasn't just about money. And then, like I said, the co-op placement started taking place. I started realizing people needed education. So I always have books in the studio. And I would hand them a book, because when I would have people waiting, I would say, "Hey, if you're going to wait, here's a book to read, at least you do something with your time." And it was always books on Kemet, like ancient Egypt, African history. So it was stuff that a lot of our community wasn't exposed to on a regular basis. So they felt really comfortable and actually happy. And a lot of people come up to me to this day and say, I remember being in the studio, you would hand me a book, and that was one of the best memories that I have. So it grew to that point, and then I ended up working with a lot of street artists, guys who were from the hard neighborhoods in the city. Again, because they trusted me, they knew that when they were in my studio, they were safe. They knew that they were doing something productive with somebody positive. A lot of them call me their mentor. They still do to this day. And it's because I didn't buy into the negative imagery that people were portraying, and I didn't buy into just following the trends. I was always about being original and being true to yourself. So that was really how the sorry, that was really how the studio shaped my life and shaped a lot of people's lives around me. God bless my parents for putting up with the music. Like, we'd be banging out music heavy late, and people
Wow.
in and out of the house from 93 up to 99. And then fortunately I said, I gotta get out of the house so I can have more business and actually do more things. And my grandmother gave me a small little loan so I can open up. Well, she basically paid first and last month's rent for me so I can open up a spot. And then there we go. That was the beginning of the studio being out in public places. And I carried that on till 2009.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I want to highlight. Thank you for that. There's a couple of things I want to highlight in terms of your progression as, Knia Singh to the lawyer. A large scale of that was the Carabana Committee. Also, I want to talk about your advocacy for, the carding, the police and the carding. I don't know if a lot of people would know that you were one of the prominent members or figures behind, the whole carding thing. And then, what led to the actual, completion of your degree or your lawyer. I wouldn't know how to pronounce it, pardon me, but, things of that nature, because we know your time is limited. So I'll let you go ahead and start giving us, that highlight.
Okay, so I know you want to talk about the carding. You mentioned something before that you
the Carabana Committee, because that was your next progression, correct? Like,
right. Okay.
Your next prominent,
right. So
contribution to the city.
There's one piece that you probably don't remember, and it's probably how you know me as well, is when I was running the studio out in the public, when Flow opened up in 2001, because I was so known with working with Power Move and the hip hop community, a lot of people recommended me to work at Flow, and then I ended up working at Flow. So I would see you promoting all the time, along with other promoters, and I would produce all the commercials for the radio. So that's where I met a lot of people in the industry as well, outside of the rap world, in the promoters game. But then in 2007, there was a point where there was a lot of controversy in the media about Carabana and not being in control. And so I heard them advertising a meeting one day, and I said, I'm going to go down. And I just stopped the car in front of City Hall, and I ran in, and I went up and I said, I want to help bring Carabana back to the community. What do I do? And they were actually having a discussion with the FMC, which was in 2007, after their first year of controlling the financing for the festival. And then their Carabana was there, and I was like, who do I join? Like I said, I just want to join the real Carabana, right? And so they pointed me to Henry Gomez and Charles Roach. And I said, I'm here to volunteer. And I started showing up at meetings and just volunteering my time. And I was talking about trademark licensing and how, the club industry is really big with Carabana. So the Carabana board and organization should be involved in that. And then it got to a point where Charles Roach, the late Charles Roach, asked that I join the board. He says, you're a young person, you're smart. I want to appoint you to the board. And in 2008, I was appointed. And staying close with the community, I was just starting to learn about what all the behind the scenes, what was going on, and was negotiating for the return of the festival, trying to figure out how can we get the community rallied to stop the takeover. And then in 2009, I was elected to the board officially. Instead of appointed, I was elected this time. And again, there was a lot of controversy with the FMC and Carabana, what was going on. And then in 2013, I was elected, and then I was appointed chair by the board. So I went through the whole, trademark negotiation with Scotiabank, and just trying to put pressure on them to realize, like, this is the community's festival, trying to talk to the band members and other members of the community, saying, you know, even though in the past the board may not have operated the right way, it still is the organization that should be in control of this. We have to fix it from the inside, and that's why I joined, and I always encourage other people to join. It was and is still a very hard struggle when so much money is involved and so much emotions and egos and habits from our community all interplay. We don't get everyone on the same page working for the right things. Some people think that if things shift, they will lose money, and others feel like they should be the one at the forefront. And that's where you get all the clashes. But this year is the 50th anniversary, and I've made a vow to do everything in my power to get our community all together on side to celebrate Caravana's 50th as a unified community, because it's always been a great time for us. But as we know, over the past 10 years, the festival has been declining. There's less and less people coming. There's less and less visitors. The club scene isn't the way it used to be. Promoters aren't making the same type of money they were, and the community is fragmented, and the youth don't even know. Like, everyone thinks it's OVO Fest, and there's nothing wrong with OVO Fest, but OVO became OVO because it happens during Caravana weekend.
Caravana, it was good marketing, yeah.
Strategy. It was good marketing. Like, Drake knew what he was doing when he invited Eminem and all these guys down on that weekend, because they were already here. All the Americans came up already. So we need to get back to understanding why that weekend is so important. It has a lot to do with economics and social progression, because our community could benefit so much from that festival. You know, it generates $400 million. It used to generate over $400 million at it during the weekend, or during those few weeks that it was operating, and that's $200 million of tax revenue. So when the city gives $500,000 and then complains, "Oh, you didn't do this properly," but we're actually putting over 100 million, almost 200 million into the pockets of the city, the province, and the country. The organization needs to be paid more respect. So that's the issue with that. And you know what, KINETIC, I know I said that I'm limited on time, but I'm not going to rush this. We'll go as far as we can. So, you know, feel free to ask me questions. I don't want to rush. This is fun. So let's do this.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. So I guess we can venture a little more into the Caravana community. Like, you know what, I think you would be the perfect person to, you know, because we have a large West Indian community base that listens to us. You know, everybody speculates about, you know, what happened. And this is not about, I want to highlight that this is not about Caravana itself, but, you know, you could provide certain answers that, you know, in your position, that could clarify what has happened, instead of people speculating. And you know, it's just basically what it comes down to, is that, you know what, in your own words, what happened to Caravana, the Caravana community, the takeover with Scotia, you know, being from the city, and you know what is being done, as you said, you know, the 50th is coming up. You know, in most of the community's eyes, you know, Caravana has, over the last couple of years since it's been taken over, and been renamed the Toronto, what is it? I can't remember. Toronto Carnival Festival, whatever they call it.
Right.
It's still Caravana to us, that have grown up under that banner and flag. Have they conceded in terms of realizing that it's more of a failure than it was a success, and that, you know what, at the end of the day, what is being done, and you know, where are we going? Where do you see this? What do you see happening over the next couple of years with it?
Well, first, if you want to know what happened to Caravana, when I first became chair, I commissioned a documentary, a 10-minute documentary that synopsizes what happened. So if you go on YouTube and you type "what happened to Caravana," you'll be able to watch that and see it, and it'll explain it in pretty good detail. But to summarize what happened is, over the years, a lot of the money that was given to Caravana by the city, invested into Caravana. Sometimes the bills weren't paid properly, and this is because of underfunding. It's not because of a gross mismanagement. Think of any government. We always know when any project happens, oh, we're over budget. We need more money. We're over budget. We need more money. That's normal. That always happens. So with Caravana, a festival that takes a lot of time and energy, when you only fund it for a 3-month period, you run into issues. And when you limit the funding, you can't pay everybody properly. Then people start fighting and things just don't go the right way. So to sum it up, in 2004 and 2005, there were slight accounting errors, which were mismanagement of funds. One year was a $5,000 check, and the other year there just wasn't a full reporting. It's nothing egregious like we're thinking millions of dollars or anything like that. But because of that, the community liaison, Councillor Joe Mihevc, he was having problems with the board in years prior. Because Caribana is about our community and Caribbean community and West Indians, there was sometimes clashes between the way the board and members wanted things done and the way the city wanted things done. And there came a point where some words were exchanged between some members and Joe Mihevc, and Joe Mihevc took offense to that. And so now when you hit 2004 and 5 with this mismanagement of funds, Mihevc gave the board an ultimatum and said, if you guys don't produce a proper audit, we're not going to provide you with the funding anymore, because we're not, you have to be accountable. Unfortunately,
can you explain who Joe, sorry to chime in there, but can you explain who Joe was?
Joe Mihevc is a city councilor. He still is, but he was appointed as the community liaison between the council and the Caribana board. So anything the Caribana board needed from the city, Joe Mihevc would be the point man, the point person. And when tensions arose with him, it strained relationships. And, like I said, when now time came for financial accountability, he put his foot down and said, no, you guys have to have this or else we're not going to provide you with funding. And that's what happened. They didn't provide funding. Now, mind you, a couple of years earlier, there was issues with Caribana and the Mass Bands Association of the mass bands not getting their money on time. And so they didn't want to let the Caribana board receive the money, and they went to the city and said, give us the money. They'd done that before, and then the festival didn't run smoothly. But, the short point of it is all, the Caribana board was not getting the proper funding to run year round. Luminato, a festival, got $15 million in its first year without any proven track record. Yet Caribana had, over a 30-year history by the 2000s, or even in the 80s, it was over a 20-year history, in the 90s, 30-year history of bringing in money and packing up those hotels and restaurants and airlines every year. None of those airlines, none of those hotels, none of those restaurants ever even put 1% of their extra revenue back to the community to say, you know what, this is for the community. And this is where the problem comes in. Everybody benefited off it except our community. So now we're starving, money gets mismanaged. The city says we're not letting you manage the money anymore. And they appointed a new group, a man named Joe Halstead, who was the former economic advisor for the city, or he had a title high up in the economics department. They appointed him to handle the funding in 2006 in order to ensure the festival ran. So first year, FMC, they created a body called the Festival Management Committee, and they handled the funding. People got paid on time, and they felt, okay, it was a success. But the agreement was that they handle it for 1 year and then allow Caribana to get its books together, and then they continue, because the FMC was supposed to dissolve December 31st, 2006. What happened is they never dissolved. They continued to receive the funding on behalf of Caribana, and they were running the Caribana Festival, basically being the people distributing the money. By the time I came on the board, I was like, what's going on? Because everyone was saying, well, we're not ready to take it over yet. But this was now 2007 and 2008. Then we started negotiating, saying, well, look, you were only supposed to do this for a year. We want the funding back because this is our festival. It's not yours. Let's go. And then now the tune started to change. Oh, well, we don't answer to you. The FMC would say, well, we don't answer to you, Caribana. We answer to the city. So then me and the chair at the time, Henry Gomez, had a couple meetings and was like, well, what's going on? What do you mean you answer to the city? And then a huge breakdown happened. They tried to offer small amounts of money to run the festival. And we're like, no, Caribana is not for sale. You can't do that. And then in 2008, we got word that Scotiabank had become a sponsor. And we said, okay, well, what's this about? And then they showed us the term. They're like, well, it's going to be called Scotiabank Caravana. And we said, wait a minute, we never sold this to Caravana, and we never authorized this. You can't make a decision without consulting the trademark owners and the owners of the festival. They said, well, if we break the deal, then we'll be liable, and then we'll sue you for breaking the deal. And like, it became a big back and forth battle. Remember, Caravana was not getting funded, so we had no funds, and then the other side had funds, so we had no legal representation, and it was just a tough battle. To the point we just had to, by 2010, when they kept using the Caravana name, Scotiabank Caravana, without our permission, we had to launch a lawsuit against them and say, look, you're infringing our trademark. We haven't authorized this. And mind you, we tried so hard to work with them and tried so hard to make it something that works for everybody, but it just wasn't in the vocabulary. So we had to go to court. We had to take that trademark infringement, and then they ended up settling in 2013 or 14, 2014, they settled. And, I can't disclose details about the settlement, but it's nothing to write home about, or else we would have seen a transformation. So what you have is a David and Goliath story, with David still holding a pebble, because still the Caravana board is still fighting with FMC over control. The city keeps providing FMC with money, and the province, and Caravana just gets ignored because it's been badmouthed so much. And what my opinion is all these stakeholders should have joined the Caravana board itself and helped make it better from the inside, so our community could be proud of the legacy it started. Those founders in 1967 didn't do this just for the money. They didn't even do it for the money. They did it to celebrate our culture and our place in Canada. And every time we go down every year as youngsters, we went down to, buy a new tracksuit and put on our gold fronts or whatever, get a fresh haircut and see girls and see dancers. And the girls go out there to meet people, and everyone goes out to enjoy music, calypso, soca, culture. But now it's turned into all this money-making thing where everyone's lost sight. So, it's sad. But people like you, KINETIC, and the people you're connected with and people I'm connected with, I hope this year we can all come together and find a way to make this 50-year anniversary work, because if we don't save it this year, it'll be gone forever, because this is the year where everybody wants to claim 50 years, and only Caravana can do that. The FMC has only been running it since 2006, and it's not to say they've been running it. They've taken the funding and they've used all the elements that Caravana already had in place. So it's not like they created a new festival or did anything. They've just been managing the money. So we have to get together and all work together to make our community whole again. And
can I ask you who the we is? Because see, I didn't have that much of a breakdown of it. I did get schooled a little on someone who would have been more from the city side of things, or had a connection there. I actually attended, I don't know what dinner it was, some gala dinner, and I actually sat beside Joe Mahabit. Like he was like right next to me, and and this was a few years ago, so I know he's still involved, clearly at the and active in whatever. But my question was always, where was the breakdown? And I mean, I know this is not what this show is about, but my question was always, where was the breakdown amongst the people who originally started it? And because I know I've heard some people refer to it as almost like the city, the province against the festival, against Caravana. But I'm thinking if that was the case, not that anybody would want to see Caravana die, but it's almost like, well, why give it to them and why continue if the people who should be benefiting didn't? And so I struggle to see like how the breakdown could be outside of the community. So when you speak of we need to get it better and we need to come together, like who is the we, and is that going to happen? Can that happen?
The we is all of us in the Caribbean community, West Indian community. It's all of us, no matter which side of the fence we sit on. Mm-hmm. It can happen if people stop looking at their pocketbooks, because I'll tell you, the people who support FMC and the other side, are people who are benefiting from their being there. Um,
Mhm.
if they weren't benefiting from them being there, then they would probably side on Caravana's side, because at the end of the day, we know what Caravana is, and no one wants to call it anything else but Caravana, which means we're paying homage to the originators of this festival.
That's
Um,
right.
it's it's difficult because once you put money in something and then you start shifting it around, that's when allegiances change. So a lot of people who work with and for the FMC are loyal Caravana supporters, but because their check is getting cut from the FMC, they have to kind of do what they say, and that's the sad part of it. And the
Right.
FMC has made people sign contracts, not non-disclosure contracts. They're not allowed to speak about their agreements. I remember in 2012, I believe it was, when the FMC was in control, they decided to move out of Jane and Finch without even telling the Jane and Finch community, because that's where the Kiddies Carnival
The
was.
kitties, yeah.
And they said, "Oh, we're going to leave Jane and Finch. We're not going to do it here anymore," because they didn't want the stigma of that area. And
Mhm.
we were just like, "Wait a minute, what are you doing?" And then they said, as soon as we found out they moved it to Downsview Park, one, to monetize it and charge admission, and two, to stay away from Jane and Finch, we jumped in and started doing the festival on our own as the original Caravana, born in Jane and Finch. So it comes down to money and control. And we had costume makers ready to help us with the Kiddies Carnival and Jane and Finch. And as soon as FMC found out about that, they threatened them and said, if you help them, we will cut off your funding and not pay you. And then since then, that's what it's been about. If you want to get paid, you got to be on that side. And it's all the hardcore supporters and idealists and people who are stuck on tradition who are on the Caravana side. But now there's a huge shift going on because a lot of the stakeholders realize the FMC wasn't all it's cracked up to be, and things aren't as smooth because within a couple of years they put themselves in debt beyond what Caravana had been in debt. A lot of people don't know that, but if you check the financial records, you'll see it. So we talk about mismanagement of Caravana, but a professional team, allegedly professional team, is still experiencing the problems because our community is very finicky. It's very funny. If you can think of a room of 5 or 10 people from the Caribbean or West Indies and try to have a conversation, you see how that conversation goes,
Mhm.
right? It's going to be a lot of yelling.
All kind of, yep.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of boasting, a lot of yelling, a lot of chupsing and all types of stuff, even though everyone in the room may still love each other, but it's the personalities that clash. And we can attribute that to so many things in the past, colonialism and slavery
Mhm.
and division, but it's manifested itself in business here
Mhm.
where we can't respect what has gone before us, or we feel like, oh, I have more right to this than you do, or, oh, don't listen to so and so, they don't know nothing, listen to me instead. And that's been the problem. So that's where we're at now. So
And I
Well,
always
but
thought it was strange that there weren't, like, when Scotiabank, when it became the Scotiabank Festival, and I always thought before that, all of the big names, that companies that benefit from this, from Caravana since way back when, and I always thought, why haven't they been sponsors? Why haven't they been pumping money into this? Like, just thinking in that way, I thought, why didn't they have them on and kind of not pressure, but and I'm talking about the original organizers, like, to bring these people in and pump money in, because I always thought, like, a lot of their revenue, and they depended on the vendors that rented space or bought their tables or anything, and I thought this seems so backwards to me, just because um, I've seen, especially like, I mean, I've seen other events, I mean, since then, and I guess you live and you learn, and you learn from the past and everything like that, but I've seen other events, not necessarily here, um, who build, and they build and basically pay nothing out because of the sponsors, the money that they get from the sponsors. So not that they don't pay out, but you know what I mean? It's not coming from generating revenue. So whatever they do generate is actual, like, profit. You know what I mean? So I just, I've always had my questions about how, and not pointing fingers, because I don't know who's involved, and so I don't take sides, and I'm not that emotionally invested, other than just being someone who went down occasionally. You know what I mean? But I but it is a shame to see, because I have attended certain events, and not just the big parade, but some of the other events, and just to see how passionate the people are, and people who have been traveling to Toronto just for this for years, and grown people who've been coming for decades, you know what I mean? So, and to see how much it is loved and appreciated, and it reaches all types of people. And even when you see fairly new Canadians or Torontonians coming out for the first or second time and being blown away, and I'm just thinking, yeah, definitely that everyone involved should have a lot more respect for it, and it should just be on another level, you know what I mean? And so it's sad to see, and so I'm hoping, and so you're still involved, and I'm curious, because like you seem to have so much on your plate right now, so do you still find time to be involved officially, or is this just a side thing, like you're there to kind of help a bit if you can?
I served 2 terms on the board. So after doing 2 terms, you can't get reelected for a third. You have to sit out.
Okay.
No time to sit out. So I've been fairly busy with finishing up school and all the activism in the community. So things have been happening. But now that I've just finished doing a few things with my bar exams, I jumped back in. Last weekend was a meeting that we had, and now we've struck the 50-year planning committee to continue to do the work. So I'm involved. I'm not on the board, but I'm a member, and what I say holds weight, because I served 2 terms at a very critical time where a lot of the changes were happening. So I have a lot of institutional knowledge, which helps. And I can tell you this: the reason why those big sponsors don't come on and why we haven't benefited, it's straightly because of racism. In the 60s and 70s and 80s, Toronto didn't want those black people jumping up and down the
streets, downtown.
They did not want that. They hated it, but they made so much money from it, so they tolerated it. But I know people who worked in the hotels, and the hotel owners will call it their summer Christmas, but they still spoke ill of our people. They still did not want our people there, even though we were bringing in the money. So you have all this money coming in. Nobody has made arrangement with you prior to say, okay, I'm planning this event in August. So when this comes, I want you to give me a special rate, or give us a kickback because we're bringing this, put 5 or 10% back to the community. Nobody made that arrangement because no one realized how big it was going to get. So now how do you start tapping a tree that's already getting fed? Or how do you, and that's what's happened.
Like they don't
that was the whole, that was actually Karen, but that was the actual the thought that many of us had. So I'm glad you touched on that and segued towards that, because basically what it was is that myself, we've had with various people, I had very many discussions, and I'm going to touch on 2 facts, and then I want to kind of move on, because again, this is not about the Caravana.
Yeah, of course.
This is this is about Knia, but I just want to touch on 2 points and then kind of segue out of that into the next discussion about your political career, and and how's that going and things, and what initiated that. But the first point I want to touch on is that, having said that, was there a special, committee that went around and said to all these owners and all these people at the hotels and chains and things that actually went to them directly instead of indirectly and say, look, we're underfunded, you guys are benefiting from this, can you help us out? Can you sponsor us so we can put this on your behalf? Or was there a community outreach to say, hey, please donate to the Caravana community, and everybody in the city donate $2, and then we don't need the city's funding that just basically covers the police, because we heard it was $500,000, but 400,000 of that went to police and cleanup.
Oh yeah. Most of all the money went to city resources. It didn't go to the board. They didn't really have much at the end. But from what I've heard, there was attempts to talk to the hotels, and they were basically shut down. There were attempts to get some sponsorship, and at one point, OLG was a sponsor. At one point, our Royal Bank was a sponsor. At another point, Western Union was a sponsor. So there were periods throughout the history where they did get big sponsors on, but I don't think there was, like, the racism really blocked it. I'm not sure who was approaching, and I'm sure they had professional people approaching, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't met. And then you most likely did have the unorthodox approach, where people would approach, and maybe not the business way that the community, the business community is used to being approached.
Right.
But the end of the day, it's racism, my brother. Because if, when they see the value of having that many people exposed to your brand and coming in, you would jump on that. And that's why Scotiabank jumped on it, because they said, holy, we're going to get sponsorship for this little bit of money and exposure to that many people. Oh, for sure. Yeah, let's put our name in front. Like, that was it was amazing for them. So
backfired, but
sorry, I do hope with today's technology that we do start a campaign and get people on board to say, let's self-fund this. And everyone always says that. Any intelligent person that comes to the conversation always says, we can fund this on our own. Like, why don't we do this? We have enough people. We have enough community. Yes, theoretically we do, but then getting people to actually spend the time to organize or put that dollar up is another story. Because I know, working on the board, there's like, out of a board of 9 or 10 people, only 2 or 3 people are actually lifting any type of muscle or doing any work. So that's the problem. People need to really be dedicated and put forth the effort. But let's make this 50 year the year that things really happen.
Now, the other question I wanted to highlight, the other part that I wanted to highlight was this, and this is from actually personal experience and talking amongst the other community. A lot of people, like myself, like, as you said, you try to jump in and join the Caribana community. At one point, I did, but and a lot of other people tried to jump on, but it became like, you know what? You're not Trinidadian. This is a Trinidadian thing because you're Jamaican or because you're Grenadian or because you're this or because of that. Everything but Trinidadian. It was kind of like, we accept your help, but we don't want it.
Yeah.
Has that mentality changed? And I'm not attacking, but it's just kind of like, to encourage our listeners to, maybe try again. Those who have tried, maybe try again if, that mentality has changed because of what's going on. Is it become it's against them now in terms of us, a West Indian community thing? Or is it still, we're Trinidadian, we should control this? And,
it has changed. The original Caribana was made up of multiple people from various islands, but over the time, because Trinidadians have the big carnival, they're very familiar with it. They feel like it's their own. So yeah, it has been an issue of recent, but the overall attitude has changed. Now's the time to break that down, because as West Indians and as Caribbeans, we were all transplanted from somewhere else, whether it's India or Africa. And I think people lose sight of that, and they hold these allegiances to these island colonies instead of holding allegiance to the culture itself. So yeah, that was a problem. Even I faced it. People said, oh, he's not Trinidadian, he's Guyanese, or he's Bermudian and Guyanese. Like, but at the end of the day, I'm the first Canadian born chair. And I think I'm one of the ones that actually did a lot of progress for the organization. So we have to stop looking at whether you're Trinidadian or Guyanese or Bermudian or Jamaican. We got to get rid of that and say, what do you bring to the table? Are you going to be effective? Are you going to help move this? And that's the real goal.
And that's actually exactly you. Thank you for saying that, because I basically wanted you to, I have a tendency of trying to lead people to answer questions, because I knew you're of Guyanese background and stuff of that nature, and you were elected to the chair, and that's why I said, has that changed and things of that nature. Thank you. So thank you for putting that forth, and and highlighting that, so our community could hear that, because there's a lot of people that were they're disenchanted with the whole idea of being a part of the Caribana community, because they're saying it's a Trinidadian thing, we're not welcome, reggae is not welcome because it mashes up or this or that, instead of being a West Indian thing, and we understand what it brings and it means to the community, but it was kind of like, it was, what, first of all, we're fighting ourselves. And then on top of that, the city doesn't want us here. So it was kind of like a hopeless sense of, despair. Like, why should we join? It's not going anywhere. It's been taken away from us. So the importance of getting behind, Caribana, I wanted to highlight that and show that, hey, you know what? We had a chair who's Guyanese, who's not Trinidadian, that, was elected and as well as appointed. So, so eloquently leading yourself into that situation. Now, I guess the next step is that we talk about I guess, is there between that and we covered or highlighted you going to Osgood Hall and graduating. So did that lead to the I guess the political career, or how did that, how did that start? And in terms of was the Caravana Committee experience a part of that led you to, wanting to be a part of the I guess get your law degree?
No, they all kind of happened early on. So my political experience and career started in 1996 and 97. In 96, I met a man named Winston Roots, who asked me to join the Conservative Youth Caucus. And he signed me up. And I started going to these meetings and getting exposed to political ideologies, etc. Then I volunteered on a political campaign for a guy named Joe Lee. When I volunteered on that campaign, I realized how practical and possible it was to be elected. It wasn't this far-fetched idea. So from running the studio and doing all the co-op placements, I was being exposed to a lot of the issues that the young people had. My father being disabled, I was exposed to issues in the community. Me being a single father of two, I was understanding what those issues were like. So then I started realizing, hey, maybe I'd be a good person to be elected because I understand what real people go through. I'm down to earth and I have a genuine care for people. So when the city was talking about amalgamation and the mega city, and then we realized all of our metropolitan Toronto boroughs would disappear and we just have one centralized government, I was of the opinion that we're probably going to lose services and we're probably going to lose a lot of things for the community. I said, well, maybe now's the time I should run and be a part of this, so at least I can help keep things together. I was fairly naive because I thought good ideas get you elected. And then I realized it was all about money, volunteers, and signs. So when I didn't win that election in 97, I said, okay, I know it's about money and all these things. I said, let me put this down. I'll establish myself, get it. And once I'm established, I'll put my hat in the ring and run again. So fast forward, we get to 2009. Like I said, my father passed. I went back to school. I registered for school. I got accepted. And I was starting school in 2010. But at the same time I was starting school, the 2010 election was coming up. And I said, well, you know what? Now's the time. Maybe I should start getting familiar with the process again so people get to know my name. So when I'm actually in a position to actually win an election, I would have already had a head start. So I put myself forward in Scarborough, Malvern for city council, and I ran. And I had a lot of good feedback. When I was at the debates, people really liked me. I designed and printed my own flyers and hand-delivered them all over the area. But again, delivering flyers and having a good idea and speaking good at debates isn't enough because only 50 people show up at each debate. So you might get exposed to about a few hundred people. You need tens of thousands of votes to win that election. So when I'm walking in down the street, people say, "Oh, Mr. Singh, we like you, we like you." And because my area was heavily Tamil, unfortunately, people generally vote according to their race or their culture or their religion. So the Tamil people would say, "Hey, Mr. Singh, we like you, but we can't vote for you. You're not our culture." And I was happy they liked me, but I was sad that they weren't voting for me because of who I was. And but I kept going. I ran after that 2010 run. There was a provincial election that came up fairly closely after, and not October, the next year, like within the year. And I said, I'm not a conservative because I didn't agree with their ideologies. I said, I'm not really NDP. The Liberals don't really have me at that point. Like there was a lot of stuff going on. I said, at least if I go with the Green Party, I could be independent and I could speak my mind and they're not going to censor me because I knew the Greens didn't have that much support, but they were a growing party. So I put myself forward as a Green member and I ran. People said, "Oh, you're a great candidate, but you're with the wrong party." And that's so that's
Yeah.
Can't win.
and then after that, when the federal election came up, the Green Party actually contacted me and they said, "Hey, we want you to run, for the seat because we don't have a candidate." And I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And I did it. And I met Elizabeth May, the leader of the party, and she liked what I was doing. So I was getting used to how everything works, how the campaigning works, how to be comfortable in debates. And I did that. And then that's shortly after I got into like I was in university, then shortly after I got into law school. So doing too much, like try not to do too much. And I was like, I'm trying not to, but when I see the need in our community, I see that we need an example. So even though I know with those elections I ran, I wasn't going to win, I knew that for one, being out there gives me experience. For two, it gives me exposure. But then for three, it gives young people and other people who are disconnected a chance to recognize someone who speaks like them, who they can identify with. And then they may start to have faith in the system. And I can't tell you, I have had a lot of people say, I've never voted before, but because you ran, I voted. And that makes me realize, okay, what I'm doing is right. Because regardless of how we think things run, our political system runs the way our society operates. If you get in, you have power to make changes. You change laws, you make laws. As long as we stay outside of that, we'll never get where we want to go. So for me to be out there on behalf of the community, whether you're not rich from a lower socioeconomic level, whether you're disenfranchised because of your race, your color, religion, like I don't care what color you are, white, black, red, yellow. If you feel disenfranchised, you need to have faith in someone who thinks like you, to know that not every politician is a crook. Not everyone's going to lie to you. So I just kept running and putting my name forward. And then this most recent election was a twofold situation. When I just graduated last year from Osgood, Bas Balkasoon, the MPP, he resigned.
Right.
When he resigned, that seat came open, and that's the riding I've lived in for 30 years. That's the riding Alvin Curling had. And I always said to Bas, I said, look, when you are going to step down, let me know, because I want to be there. I want to take it over. But unfortunately, I never knew he was going to step down. It came all of a sudden. So then there was this nomination race. Who was going to be the next Liberal candidate? Because that area is generally Liberal. So whoever runs as a Liberal usually wins the seat. So I ran. But then again, there was other candidates who were from different communities who had a lot of support. And I didn't get the nomination. But I did get a lot of exposure. And again, at the end of that nomination campaign, a lot of people were rooting for me, but our West Indian community didn't come out in droves. The Tamil community did, and there was a Tamil candidate put forth for the nominee. But Kathleen Wynne called me at the end of that, and she said, hey, Knia, I know you didn't win, but I heard a lot of good things about you, and I just want to congratulate you on making a good effort, and doing well. And I said, thank you. And that signaled to me, okay, I don't have to win to make a difference. I don't have to be elected to actually have influence. And that just showed me things were working the right way. And then now, because during that election, Raymond Cho, who was the city councillor, he ran against the Liberal candidate. He ran as a Conservative, and he actually won. So he won the provincial seat, which vacated his city council seat. And that's what recently just happened. Because his city council seat was open, everybody jumped in trying to win it. 29 people ran for that seat.
Wow.
And I was one of them. And I'm proud to say I ran in 97. So it's not like I was new to the game. And I ran in 2010. And that's the area that I've lived in for over 30 years. And I ran. And again, I put a strong effort. I had a good campaign advisors, Justin Rochester and Adrian Curry, and a good team with Coco and a lot of other people. But our social media campaign, Amanda and Narain, she did a brilliant job along with Colin and Andrea. They just, because I had so much media exposure over the recent years, we just utilized that, and they were just pushing all the interviews, the image, and we connected with the social media audience in a way that other candidates haven't. So, I'm here working in the courts and walking around, and people are saying, oh, you're going to win. You're going to win. I'm like, no, I don't know. Like, I hope I do, but I don't know. But the presence made them feel like something was happening. And like you said, you were following the campaign online. We were working hard. Like, I was in the courts all day. And then as soon as I finished court, I'd be out in the night, knocking on doors and delivering flyers and doing debates and doing everything we could. Didn't win, but again, it's about exposure. And every time I walk into a room now, people say, hey, if I could have voted for you, I would. I wish you lived in my area, I'd vote for you.
Well,
so
that's
it's
exactly
about,
because you weren't in my writing, exactly. You weren't in my writing, and I couldn't vote for you. Mine is Oakville, so unfortunately, I was like, we can't vote
But
for him.
what's it it's crazy because like you said, I mean the exposure and social media huge, but again, like you said, it boils down to it is a numbers game, right? And um with work I've done in the past, I've seen the process. I mean, even the selecting, I mean, I haven't been involved in it, but I see even what went into choosing the candidate that would run, and there's a lot that you got to be, I mean, to even be considered, you got to be really clean and everything like that. And then, pique someone's interest to even be considered. And I mean, for you to get a call from Kathleen Wynne and for Elizabeth May to sit down, that's huge. And so, I mean, for people who, I mean, are not that familiar with the names or the process, just recognize that that's huge, first of all. So, but again, it boils down to numbers, because to lose a seat, to lose a riding, that's losing a seat, and that has major impact on the whole party, right? So, but I read somewhere that you are or were involved with the Ministry of Community Safety and Corrections.
Yep.
And so how did that happen? And is that something you currently do? And what were you doing exactly? Because I know that tied into the whole carding and street checks. And I remember seeing you in the news for that reason. So if you could kind of tie that together and tell us how that all came together.
Sure. That all started, well, it started from being stopped all the time.
I saw somewhere, I swear you said okay, I don't want to exaggerate the number, but it has 30 times or something in double digits.
At least 30 times I've been stopped.
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
At least 30 times I've been stopped, but I have documented proof of at least 11 from the Toronto Police, because those are the contact cards they entered in the database on me. So that experience basically formulated me working with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services. And that's because a good friend of mine, Chris Williams, he used to be an artist in my studio. He used to rap. And as I kept running the studio, he went off to school and he became a professor, and he became professor of criminology. And he was very keen on what was going on in the city with policing. And so was I. We always paid attention to these things because we know our community was victimized and targeted over the years. So there came a point where he said, hey, Knia, there's these contact cards, that's happening. And he said, I was stopped on my birthday when I was stopped on my birthday, and they collected a card from me. So I said, hey, let me see the card. And he said, well, I'm going to share it with you. And he showed me this contact card, which had his name, his birth date, his description, his, clean shaven. And this was all because he went to visit a friend at Allenbury near Fairview Mall. And the police assumed him to be a drug dealer, or assumed him to be up to no good. And they boxed his car in and demanded him to produce identification when he left the car. And then he was like, I know what you guys are doing. You're carding me. You're taking this information from me. You're going to enter it into the database. And they tried to play coy, etc. But, he knew his safety was in jeopardy, so he went along with it. And he later did a Freedom of Information request, which is called an FOI. And once he did the FOI, that's when he got that sheet back. So when he shared that sheet with me, he said, Knia, he goes, you've been so involved in things politically, community-wise with the studio. He goes, you should do a check and see what they have on you. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I should. I'm saying, I'm sure they have a file on me, but I'm not sure how big it is, so I should know. So I did ask, I did the FOI request, and I was surprised to get back 57 pages of information from the Toronto Police.
Wow.
And I had never been charged and I had never been arrested, but there was stuff, when my father passed, there was a 911 call in there. When there was issues with family members, there was those documents. But then there was all these stops, driving traffic stops with police. And then my descriptions were changing throughout them. Some of them said, not police friendly, rude to police. Two of them said, born in Jamaica. One of them said, immigration warrant. Another, my height ranged from 5'9" to 8 feet tall. Like, when I was reading through all these, I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is all inaccurate. Not let alone did they collect it in the first place. Second, it's very inaccurate. And third, it jeopardized my safety. So if anyone remembers back in the day when you're getting stopped and then the cops sitting there in the car for like 30, 40 minutes and you're just sitting there and saying, what the hell is he doing? Like, is he going to write me a ticket?
You're looking through, yeah.
What they were probably doing is reading through all your contact cards, all the descriptions, all the interactions you had, all the notes the officers made on you. So when an officer labels me as rude to police, not police friendly, that's putting my life in jeopardy. Because when an officer is going to approach my vehicle the next time and he's seeing rude to police, not police friendly, oh, I better be on guard for this guy. And what if I'm in a mood that day because I've got stopped for the third time in that week and I say something that aggravates an officer? Like that, it was very unsafe. So speaking out against that was very important. So once I got those documents, I shared them with the Toronto Star because they were doing a series and tracking all the data. They had done all the mapping, they had done all the FOIs, and they were basically showing how disproportionate it was for African Canadians to be stopped over any other people. So when my story came out and they realized how much information and how inaccurate it was put on the front page of the Toronto Star. Along me and Chris
I
were.
remember that, yes.
Yeah, and when they shared that data with the police chair at the time, Dr. Alok Mukherjee, his quote was, "This is devastating and unacceptable," saying, how could we treat our citizens, our law-abiding citizens who contribute to the society as if they were criminals? So with that quote and with that front page, a whole storm of interviews started taking place. That article came out when I was in my third week of law school. So it was a huge thing for me because, for one, I had just made it into law school. I'm just starting to learn about the law, and then next thing you know, I'm on the front page of the paper with a major legal issue. The dean of the school came up to me and said, "You know what, Knia? Anything you need support, I got you." The students were like, "Wow, I didn't know this was happening in Canada. I thought this only happened in the U.S." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean you only thought this happened?" Because I thought everybody knew this happened. So then what ended up happening is we formulated something called the Osgood Society Against Institutional Injustice, which was a group of students, me and 5 other students. We formed the society to address systemic issues of institutional racism or discrimination. So whether it's in the schools, the hospitals, the police, any major institution that discriminates against people or mistreats them, we were combating. So the carding was the first one that we were able to use OSI to challenge. And so what I would do is, when the newspaper article hit the front page, a lot of lawyers and activists were like, yeah, this is what we've been talking about. We've been saying we've been racially profiled for years, but you wouldn't listen. We've been saying that the police are biased, but you keep denying it. So this is proof that something's wrong. So we would all go to the police board and make deputations to say, you need to stop your officers from doing this. The policy needs to be introduced. Something needs to change. And over and over of us telling our stories. And, you know, what I would do is I would always book 2 deputations. I would book one for myself as a citizen of Toronto, as someone who lives here and experienced it. Then I would book one on behalf of OSI as a student body that was speaking about legal issues and how it violates the charter and how it violates human rights and the Supreme Court case law that says you can't stop people without a legal justification. Once those were going through with, you know, Howard Morton from the Law Union and Noah Mendelsohn from the Civil Liberties Association, like there were so many activists, BADC, Black Action Defense Committee, so many of us saying these things at every meeting, to the point where they developed a policy and they actually introduced measures that would stop police from behaving in this way and protect the public. And there was just 3 main points to the policy that we finally got them to implement, which was, 1, a police officer had to inform you if he was going to collect data from you, because remember, carding always takes place when there's no criminal activity. So if there's nothing going on, there's no criminal activity taking place, and an officer wants to speak to you, you have a right to walk away. You have a right not to say anything. You have no obligation to answer. The only time you have an obligation to provide identification is if you're a driver of a motor vehicle. So what would happen is we made those 3 conditions. 1, officer would have to tell you that it's a voluntary interaction, so you have a choice to walk away and not answer the questions. 2, that they would document it and give you a copy of the information they collected. And 3, they would destroy any data they collected if it was collected illegally. So we got that all in this policy. And then when John Tory was elected, Bill Blair hadn't implemented the policy. He knew that the police board had put it forth, but he was from writing a procedure because all the cops and the chiefs, they were saying, "Oh, we're gonna lose, we're not gonna be able to do our job," or I don't know what they were saying. Basically,
Their power.
that's it. They didn't want to.
Intimidate, basically.
Yep.
Intimidation, their intimidation tactic. That's what we're gonna lose.
They didn't want to give up the power, so there was a lot of resistance to it. So when Mayor Tory got elected, him and Blair and a retired judge, they went behind closed doors without consulting the community and rewrote a policy that took out those protections, and then they reintroduced it. And first, we all were up in arms. We stopped it from being voted on, and they wouldn't, the board wouldn't vote and pass it because they saw how much problems it was creating. But then just a couple months later, they actually passed that new policy that replaced the good policy. So once that happened, we were like, after a year and a half of fighting and getting somewhere positive where we thought we had, made progress, you reversed it in a couple months. Me and another lawyer, Vilkos Bogar, we said, you know what, this is not the way to go. Like, we have to challenge this in the courts. So what I did is I launched a charter challenge in divisional court that says the decision of the police board is unconstitutional because carding violates the charter. So once we put that forth, I made that announcement on June 10th, 2015. Once we made that announcement, within a week, Minister Nakvi, who was the minister of, stepped forward and said, the province is stepping in, we're going to ban carding, and we're going to introduce regulations by the fall. So once that process started was when I was actually started working with the ministry, not working getting paid, but working on policy as a community member and as a law student and as a human rights activist to get these changes implemented. So the ministry made a call out to all the different community organizations and lawyers and civil rights activists and the police organizations and said, this is going to be across Ontario, so let us know what you think, how you think this should go. And they did consultations and they drafted a regulation policy. That first draft of the regulation was not effective, and we were all up in arms about it again, and we made them change it. And then they came back with a final regulation in March of 2016. So yeah, there was meetings with me and the minister, private meetings, some public meetings, but we were just giving our input. And because of my age, because of my gender, because of my ethnicity, I was able, and because of my legal training at that point, I was able to speak on those issues in a unique way that many people weren't able to speak on. There was only a few other lawyers of color, such as Anthony Morgan and Roger Love. And then there was Desmond Cole, who had wrote the Toronto Life article. So there was voices coming forward, but sitting down with the ministry and actually giving them insight as to why this regulation will work or why this one wouldn't work was very critical and valuable to them to know what to consider. And that involvement shaped where things are now. Now, in about a week and a half, I'm going to Edmonton. I've been asked to address the carding issue in Edmonton because there's a huge issue with the Somali community being stopped and harassed. And I've been invited to various schools, universities, to speak on carding. And even just today, a Swedish journalist came from Sweden and said, he had contacted me a few weeks ago and said, I've been doing research. I've seen your name. I see you're involved in this. I'd like to meet with you when I come to Toronto. We're having issues in our country with some violence and stuff, and we're looking at solutions. And we see what carding is done here, so we want to know, the pitfalls of it or how you feel about it, so you can help educate us. So that activism has gone a long way, and that's how I was working with the ministry. Right now, I'm going to be working with other ministries in relation to children and youth services in regards to a new action plan that's combating racism and trying to put money into the community, especially for African Canadian youth, because of the challenges they're facing in schooling, challenges they're facing in the justice system. So I think, the lesson is when you stand up for something, you have to just stand up, and it can go a long way. You don't know how far it can go, but you just have to do it.
I
Let
just
me
want to
ask.
say,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for that was the for me personally, that was the main or I guess the main initiative for bringing you onto the show and to speak. And then when Karen and I started shortlisting, as I said, that was part of the idea. So I'm glad that we've gotten to that point, and I want to say thank you for all your work that you've done for the community, for us that are affected by that. Now, before you go on, Karen, I just wanted to ask. You touched on something that actually provoked a thought, and what, if you can, what we are stopped or carded now that you're in this prime position? You know what their new policy entails. What are our rights in terms of can we still walk away from them? Like, what is our procedure? What should we do as a marginalized people and as an ethnic people if we are approached by these police? And how do we know when they're doing something legally and illegally, if you can?
Okay, well, I think the best way to illustrate is maybe start with an example. Do you want to pose an example of a situation, and I can start breaking it down for you as to how it goes?
Well, me personally, I'd like to. I wouldn't. I understand why you'd want to do that, but I'd like to lean away from that, because it's kind of like, it's just more like to highlight the points, because if we get to that specific situation, we may overlook another situation.
Okay, that's
right.
fair. Okay, so really, it comes down to this. Under the Charter of Rights, that's our Constitution, you have a right to be free from arbitrary detention, which means you should never be stopped for an arbitrary reason, which is you should never be stopped without legal justification. You should not be stopped if you're not engaged in criminal activity. So if an officer wants to speak,
Oh no.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
no. I'm like thinking, is it just my screen? Because
Yeah,
it's been
that's what,
happening.
yeah,
It's been
that's what I
happening.
thought.
It happened a couple of times over here. And I thought, please don't let this. Okay.
We'll see if
Hopefully he'll be
he
back.
pops back on,
I'm
but
gonna send another invitation. I'm just blown away by, I mean, I know you felt it too when you took that moment to thank him, because I
yeah.
think what we're hearing, I mean, just what he's done, and this is so far, you know what I mean? Like,
And it's not recognized as the way it should be, and that's why we decided to bring him onto the show, right?
but and that's the thing. Sometimes it's not that people wouldn't give that recognition, or but I think it's who knows, or I guess so, like mainstream media, I'm sure they're familiar with, and they know, and they do enough research to um give it some shine. But again, like you said, I think it's really important for us to bring it to spread it in our direction, however far we reach, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm blown away. I definitely need him to get back on. So I'm trying here. I'm just gonna let him know. But have you ever been? I'm just out of curiosity. Have you ever been stopped for no reason,
Yeah.
or a reason that you didn't
Yeah,
see?
you know what?
Yeah.
It's what it comes down to is that I've gone to the part as far as I've never been to jail, but I've been arrested and put in a holding cell, um, based on nothing, or been stopped because we've been driving up the street, and there's been four of us in the car, and they stopped us arbitrarily. We weren't speeding, our seatbelts are on. We weren't, doing anything out of the ordinary, because as soon as you are driving and you see a police car behind you, you straighten up real quick, and it's kind of like that pit bull and chihuahua feeling, behind you. Even if you're not doing anything, you feel like you're doing something, right? And yeah, I've been stopped, a couple times, so it's just one of those things that, what, that's why we have the uneasy feeling of mistrust in the in the West Indian community, or the marginalized community, period. As long as you are I hate to use the term black, but 'cause I'm not a color, or you're not a color, but the our ethnic group are targeted, and that's the best way to say it. We're targeted just from simply walking down the street. If you're walking in the wrong neighborhood, if you walk down Forest Hill, you know, we pay taxes in the GTA, but I can't walk down Forest Hill, or or something of nature. What I want to look at pretty houses. I'm up to something bad, like or you're walking with your girl, and you're just forecasting and dreaming and getting ideas, collective ideas, and you know what, you and your
Or
girl may be
possibly
walking.
looking to purchase in the area. Why
Yeah,
not?
exactly. Right, and yeah, exactly. You're forecasting, you're dreaming, whatever it is, or you're taking ideas,
Yeah.
which I often do. I go into these areas and I look at houses, and I take ideas and I formulate what our next house will look like, or or ideas that way we can take pictures and things of that nature, and that's what you're doing. But yet you're up to criminal activity. What are you doing here? We've been observed taking pictures in the
Planning your
community, and
robbery.
yeah, like
That's
and
crazy,
when
but
they run your name, they see you don't have a criminal record, but yet you're up to no good. And I'm like, I'm not going to age myself, but I'm a fully grown man, and what I mean, I've never had a criminal record.
yeah.
You know,
And I think
there's
it's
still a cost,
more
and they
more
know who
for
you are by they run your car.
more for men. I mean, I'm just saying in general, I think even men of color like get it a little more. And there is that age factor as well. I think young men um uh are looked at differently. I haven't been stopped uh for reasons like they have reason to stop me because and I won't go into it because it might happen again. No, I'm kidding. But no, they had a reason to stop. But actually there was one incident where I got a flat on the highway and ended up waiting, and thank God for my brother, and he ended up coming. It was dead of winter. It was the day before I was going to Jamaica. This is years ago. It was like freezing. And I sat in that car and for hours. And I mean, remember, I was flying the next morning. So I had things to do still. So I was just like miserable. I was just not in the greatest mood. But thankfully, my brother came and rescued me, changed my tire. Like we had to, and so I'm driving, taking my time going home on the road versus taking the highway just because with this tire, I was a little paranoid. And so the whole cell phone thing. But I was stopped and my phone rang. And it was my brother calling to check on me to see, okay, how far have I gotten? Did I get home? And I just looked over at the phone and then I didn't even touch it, honestly. So then at that very moment to my left, um, there was a police car. So the officer said something to me. I don't even know exactly what he said because I wasn't focused. And then I looked, and of course, like you said, you're like, you're like, it's police like stopping you. I think that's across the board. I think anybody, especially when you're driving and the police stop you, you're just like, what did I do? You know what I mean? But in that case, I was like, oh, and then I turned around and I just explained. I was like, oh, I'm just, yeah, my phone's ringing up, but I didn't touch it. Like, I was just like, I don't know if like, I just reacted like that. And this officer looked at me and said, like, he was pissed and said, I was just checking to see if you're okay with attitude. I was like, well, sorry, dude, like, that's not my first reaction to you for many reasons. You know what I mean? Like, and I think a lot of people share that. We're not, but there are a few people in this world that that maybe that would have been their initial reaction to a police officer pulling over, you know what I mean, and checking. And it wasn't like I was pulled off with my four-way, what do you call those? Do you call those emergency light, whatever,
Just like
blinkers or yeah,
your hat.
hazard, that's it. So, but for some reason they saw, and I mean, it was nice to know after. I was like, oh geez, but my like his first reaction, and just the fact that he got pissed, he didn't even say it nicely. I was just, and then they drove off. I was like, okay, shoot. But I've had a lot of male, so Black male friends and family who have been stopped repeatedly over the years. And when I heard the stories from them, I was, like I said, it hasn't happened to me. So I was like, wow, really? And then when you hear it over and over, but it's sad because it's just kind of like, yeah, it's just part of life. Like it's a part of it. And I'm like, no, like why? And I mean, but it's like, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You answer them, you kind of do whatever. And Knia said something about in his report, or some of his cards, they reported that he was rude, right, to officers or whatever. And a lot of people in power look at, or you asking a question, maybe even
Yes.
why was I stopped, or
Yeah, exactly.
what's the
As
purpose
yeah.
of this, or as being rude, because oh no, you're not supposed to question anybody in authority.
so,
You know what I mean? An authority figure, like you're supposed to just shut up and answer questions. And so, yeah, I wish we had gotten, his take on. I hope he could still come back. Maybe not. His take on how to how to act, or what to say, or your rights, like you said, in that situation. And you know what? And we may not get any back, and hopefully if we don't, we can have him join us on another show if he can squeeze in the time, because as you heard, this man is very busy juggling a lot. And so if you're hearing us, like, I don't know if he's just having an issue. Yeah, we definitely appreciate his time. And I actually had posted the link on vexradio.com, where we're broadcasting live right now, for anybody who wanted to call in and share their stories, their comments, or ask any questions. Our time is limited with Knia Singh, so he may not be able to answer them directly now, but even to hear other people's experiences on any of the topics we touched on. So that link is up now, and it's also about to be on the YouTube the YouTube page as well, if you're viewing there. So it is posted there. But like I said, vexradio.com. And I didn't mention at the top of the show, which I always do, vexradio.com is a great place to listen to hip hop, R&B, old school, new school, 24/7, as it is a online radio station. And that's where we broadcast live every Tuesday night for the last year, like I mentioned at the top of the show, our first anniversary. And if you did miss any of this broadcast, or you want to catch any of our previous shows, the show is also available as a podcast. And you can find all the links to our past shows on vexradio.com. Actually, there's a tab now where you can click for cake, and you'll see all the cake stuff. So, yeah. Sad to say, I don't know if he's going to be back. So
yeah, something must have happened technically.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to highlight, his website, if we can.
Yeah, for sure.
And then just say basically his Instagram is Knia Singh, which will be KNIA SINGHJD, or sorry, Knia Singh. That would be his Instagram, and he has a website which is spelled the same, www.kn. Oh, he's back.
Yay. Okay. Finish up though, his website.
Yeah. It is KNIASINGH.ca. You can visit him at his website to see what's going on with him and see how you can get involved and help him. But he's back here, so we'll continue from where we left off.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm giving you a whole lowdown, and I'm like, are you there?
No, and I saw when it froze, but it happened before, like I said, on my screen. So I thought, okay, maybe it was just me. And then when I saw you gone, we were kind of freaked out. But thank you for coming back. I don't know how much longer you have, but so we should just jump right into what you were saying as far as
Yeah, where did I leave off? 'Cause
Last
I was-
thing,
You had just started. You didn't even get into it as far as, what you should
you
do
said,
or your
yeah,
rights
what you basically, yeah,
Oh,
when
wow.
stopped.
was, yeah.
Oh no.
What we
Most
heard was,
critical piece. Okay,
yeah,
that's all
the
There's
right.
a
last thing that we heard
charter.
from you,
There's
yeah,
Yeah, what was the last thing you heard from me? Then I'll pick it
yeah, I was about to say,
up.
the last thing we heard from you was basically, you know what, that you don't have the right to be arbitrarily stopped if you're not doing anything illegal.
Okay. If you're, did you hear the example of the park bench?
no.
Okay.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
Oh no.
So that's where I started the real explanation. Okay, so say you and your friends are on a park bench, and an officer comes up to you and says, "Hey, what are you doing? Can I see some ID?" You have a right not to answer any questions. That's just your right as a human being. You don't have to say anything at any time if you don't want to. The only time you're obliged to actually identify yourself is when you're driving a motor vehicle under the Highway Traffic Act. And then a few other situations, like when you're charged with a provincial offense. But let's just stick to driving a car. When you're the driver, you have to identify yourself. Fine. Standing out in the public, sitting on a park bench, you're not obligated to identify yourself, so you don't have to say anything. If you choose to say something, that's your prerogative. But what it is your rights under the regulations basically dictate an officer has to tell you if he's not investigating a criminal, if he's not arresting somebody or a part of a covert operation, he has to tell you, or he or she has to say, I would like to speak to you. It's voluntary. You don't have to answer my questions. The reason why they have to do that is because if they don't give you that notification, you can be considered being detained. So the key question to ask, if an officer is going to ask you for ID, if you want to cut to the chase, you would say, am I being detained? And when you ask, am I being detained? That gives the officer an option to say, yes, you're detained, or no, you're not. If you are detained, your charter rights are automatically triggered, whereas you have a right to know why you're being stopped, what the offense is, and you have a right to call a lawyer. And the lawyer is the major right that people understand. So once you say, am I being detained? The officer said, yes, you're being detained. I say, okay, I'd like to speak to my lawyer. And then at that point, you don't have to say anything else. And they have to give you that right. If they don't give you that right, then they're violating their charter obligations. Now, let's say they say, no, you're not detained. If you're not detained, that means you're free to go. That means you're not being held for any specific purpose. When you could say, okay, well, officer, if I am not being detained, I'd like to leave now, or I'm going to leave now, and you can get up and walk away. Or you could say, officer, I'm not being detained. Since I'm not being detained, I don't want to answer any of your questions. So
Further questions, yeah.
right. So there's something about detention the public should understand is that there's two types of detention. There's a physical detention whereby you're in handcuffs or you're blocked or you're cornered and you can't move. And you realize, okay, I can't go anywhere. I'm detained. I'm blocked. And then there's psychological detention, which means if three officers are standing around you, you can go the other way or you can try to move in between them, but you believe that you have no right to leave. Therefore, you are still being detained. Or if an officer asks you a question or says to you, stay here, well, that's an actual order. That's a detention. But if just their presence makes you feel like you have no choice but to comply with them, then you are being detained. Psychological detention, which means you have the charter rights triggered as well. You should be informed of a lawyer and you should be informed of the charges. So what ends up happening now is through the regulations, let's go to the park bench scenario again. If he starts asking you questions, now if he collects information from you or if he doesn't, under the regulations, he has to write out a receipt that basically outlines who he is, his badge number, where the stop occurred, and why did he actually stop and try to get information from you, whether he was successful or not. That's part of the regulation, and that is an accountability measure. And on that receipt, on the back, it shows where you can complain. So now you would get a situation where if officers are going around just stopping random people and trying to get their information, if they're not giving them that receipt with their badge number and location and why they stopped, they're violating the regulations. They could be held accountable. The reason why we do that is just to make sure you know the grounds of why you're being stopped. So arbitrary means without a reason. If an officer stops you and he can't articulate why he stopped you, then he's doing it arbitrarily. So he has to say, well, I stopped you because a gentleman was running down this street wearing a blue hat, blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and a yellow scarf. And that way, you know that it's not just a bogus reason, because it'll be written down and documented. Now, officers can still give you the false reasons, but then when you have that complaint procedure, if you actually go through with it, you can see that no, there was no call in, there was no radio call of a person running down the street, there was no complaint. The officer had just made up a reason, which is an arbitrary reason to detain you. Another aspect of the regulations and being stopped is you have a right to ensure that if the data was not collected properly, that it's destroyed. And anybody who's had data collected on them from January 1st, 2017 and prior, that information is now restricted. So if you were to be stopped today, no officer could punch up any data and get it that was prior to January 1st. It's not accessible. So the only way that it's accessible is through the chief or the chief's designate. They can access it under extreme circumstances if so required. But even when they do access it from now, if they have to, there's a log of it. It's measured, it's counted, and at the end of every quarter, it's reviewed. So if there's a pattern starting to emerge where the chief is giving permission to people to access previous carding data, it will show, and then the ministry can actually, say, well, there's a problem here. This has to stop. So there's a lot of various scenarios that can arise, and that's why I would like to hear, I'd like to hear a couple of questions to say, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Then I can kind of guide you on it. But the overall, Go ahead.
Now, I wanted to ask you though about, because I'm listening to this and wondering, because I'm making the assumption, I'm like, they must hate you, or they must, like officers you must be on, one of their lists. But do they, or do you get that sense? Do you interact with officers? And I remember again reading about, and I think this is what triggered it all for you, is a part of your studies, your program, you wanted to do, I think, is it called a ride along, or is that a movie? What is it called?
It is called a ride along.
Oh, it is a ride along. Sorry. So you would actually, will you tell us what that is? And it seemed like this is what sparked this investigation, I guess, on your part, and how you became involved with the whole carding issue. So how did that, tell us more about the ride along and how everything came about from that then.
Right. Okay. So I will say, I've met a lot of good police officers, and I really commend officers for putting themselves on the line. And I don't think all officers are bad. They're just like people. Some people are bad, some people are good. Now, the institution of policing, in my opinion, has a culture that has been ingrained in it that makes certain behaviors acceptable, which is racism and bias, especially towards African Canadians and African Americans and indigenous people. So that's where my problem lies. Now, do they dislike me? I've actually got a lot of support from officers. When they see me, they say, Mr. Singh, respect what you're doing. I may not be able to say it publicly, but we support you. Just know that a lot of us support you. You're doing the right thing. I haven't heard many officers tell me they don't like me or heard rumors like that, but I'm sure some of them may not, because they feel their power is taken away. But I think at the end of the day, I always approach it from a legal standpoint and a human standpoint, and I'm not about bashing any individual officer or situation unless specifically there's specifically warranted. It's more about the way they've treated the population generally. So I can proudly say that I've gotten support from a lot of officers, especially senior officers. In the beginning, Chief Saunders didn't seem to be too happy with the work I was doing, but over time, we've met each other in a lot of different places, and we have the utmost respect for each other, and we have very good dialogues when we see each other. So I can say I think they know that my heart's in the right place, and I'm not doing this to just stir the pot. I'm doing this because it's a human right, and then we live in Canada, and Canada espouses all these values of freedom and democracy and liberty, and I'm just trying to make sure that we hold up to it. So when it comes to part of my final year in law school in my criminal intensive program, at the end of our semester, we did a few things such as visit jails, visit forensic centers, and another major piece of it was going on a ride along. So now each individual student has to apply to go on their ride along. And it was funny because when I was signing up my papers, I'm thinking in my head, ha, 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 they'll probably deny me this ride along. And then I thought again, I said, no, why would they and how could they? First of all, I've never been charged, never been arrested. I'm not a threat. And if they were to deny me, that'd be pretty crazy considering all the work I've been doing. Sure enough, I got denied the ride along. And I went through a whole process because of it. I was in shock. I was very upset. I was offended. And I tried to talk with the officer as to why. He gave me a whole bunch of kind of, I don't want to say excuses, but there were reasons that they thought that were legitimate. And I rebutted each one of them saying that that's not accurate, etc. And then he said, oh, yeah, okay, you're right. That's not inaccurate. But, oh, you were stopped while driving with police. And I'm like, yeah, because the police target me all the time because I'm black. And then we just went back and forth. And then he said, well, listen, it's up to the unit commander. I can't do anything about it. So I told my professors. My professors were very upset. They got the dean involved, and they all wrote a letter to the police asking for an interview to say, look, this is one of our best students. Can we talk about this? Can we figure out a way for him to go on this ride along? And then that request was denied. They didn't. They said, no, there's nothing further to discuss. And then at that point, I was like, you know what? At the onset, I could have went straight to the media and said, oh, they denied me. But I said, I'm not going to use my status or my ability to get the media on side, because the next student like me may not have that power. They may not be known. They may not have that luxury. So I said, let me go through the proper normal channels that an average person would go through. And I was going through the channels. So first was to try to talk to them. Second was to write the letter. Then third, I said, you know what? I'm going to call the unit commander myself. And I called the unit commander and I spoke to them. And I said, I want to know why you denied me. And they said they denied me because I associate with people with criminal records. And I'm like, what do you mean? I go, I ran a recording studio for years. I was a mentor to people, and some of them, but that's not a reason to deny me.
How did you
Long story short,
that? How did you know that?
Well, it goes down to the carding data. Because I was stopped on a couple occasions with people that had criminal records, they were able to look at those records because it lists who you are stopped with if you're stopped with more than one person. And they would see, oh, that person, who is that person? Oh, they have a criminal record. So that's how they saw that. And I found it interesting because just before that, the chief had announced that all that carding data would be restricted. And evidently it wasn't at that time. So after the unit commander said, no, you're still denied, I'm not changing my decision, I said, okay. I said, and that's when I went to the media. That's when I told the media what happened. And that's when I launched an OIPRD complaint and a human rights complaint. And the OIPRD complaint is the Ontario Independent Police Review Director, and they examine police misconduct. And the Human Rights Tribunal examines human rights violations. So I felt there was two. I felt there was one police misconduct, and I felt there was a human rights violation. So with the OIPRD mediation was a step in it. Like I was able to meet with the officer that denied me and have a conversation. And, there was misconceptions, but after talking it out with them, I realized, okay, well, you know what? I'm not here to make it difficult. I want officers to understand we're all human beings and sometimes we can make mistakes. And since then, that relationship with that officer has now improved. And I can tell you, it was funny. It was last Monday that I went on my ride along, because after the mediation, they said, well, what would you like to come of this? And I said, well, I'd like, first of all, to make sure that this doesn't happen to any other students in this way. And second of all, I want to make sure that the ride along program doesn't get watered down because of my complaint. And three, I would like my ride along. And they said, yeah. That was the very last thing I asked for.
Wow.
And they granted it, and I did it last Monday. Now, I'll never know if it's the real ride along, because I'm sure like Knia Singh's coming in, you got to make sure things are good. But the point is, we were able to have a dialogue and mend things. You know, because if I had a different personality, or they had a different personality, we could have been at ends and just refused to talk to each other, refused to sit in a room together, and just be at odds. But now that has been dealt with. There's still the human rights issue that has to be dealt with, because I still believe that a decision should be made on processes and how people are treated and discriminated against, and I think it still needs to go through. So that's still in process. But the ride along has been dealt with, and you know, the other students in the class this year have gone on the ride along. So from what I hear, everything is working the way it should.
Can I
That's
put under
amazing.
Can I put under microscope your pre, I guess, lawyer degree? You know, like, you know what, how police treated you before you had it versus now that they know that you're a full-blown lawyer and practicing. What is there a contrast or a differentiation of how they handle you now? You know, because you are known in the media, you're known in the community. They had obviously with 30 plus stoppings, they had prior knowledge of who you were. Now that they know that you've you know, you're now a lawyer, how do they handle you? Is there, you know, I'm sure there's a different respect level, or you know, are they careful around you, more careful around you, like, you know,
Yeah,
a backdrop story?
it's hard to say, because prior to law school, I was driving all the time and getting stopped all the time. I mean, prior to university and law school, I was driving all the time. Once I hit university, it was just easier to take the bus because of parking and because of traveling times, etc. So I wasn't driving for the last 6 years as much as I normally would. Recently, since I'm finished school and I'm articling now. Oh, and I have to clarify, I'm not a lawyer yet. I'm still articling. I have my jurisdiction. Not until I get called to the bar, am I an official lawyer practicing, but hopefully that's soon. But I can't tell. There's only been one time where I was stopped within the past few years. And it was because me and my friend, we went to a concert, and then he reversed down a one-way street. And then as soon as he came down the one-way street, the cops, you know, put on the blinkers, stopped us. And then it just so happened that his license was suspended and he was unknown to him. So now the second officer is by my window, and he's like, do you have any ID? Right. And here I am knowing the whole drill. Like, I could have refused him. But the point was, the question would have come up for me to produce my ID, because I would have had to be the legal driver after my friend's license is suspended, because he could no longer drive his car. I had to drive the car. So instead of
made life harder for him too. It's a tactic that they use. So just to chime in there, sorry.
Yeah, like, so instead of, you know, asserting my rights and being a smart ass or whatever, I was just like, yeah, I said, I have my license. I clarified it. I said, I have my license, so I can show you I can drive. And that's as far as it went. I wanted him to know I wasn't giving him my ID because he asked me. I was showing him my license so I could drive the car. But that's the only time that came, and it was at night and it was dark, and maybe they didn't know who I was. But I do realize when I'm in the courts, a lot of people recognize me, and I'm sure some officers know who I am. I don't think all of them do, but I do get a respect level from them. But yeah, I haven't been in a situation yet where I've just been randomly stopped, and I hope it doesn't happen, but it will be interesting if it does ever happen.
No, we've talked about, we've highlighted. There's so much more to who you are and what you've done for the community, and how over the extent of your years, well, all your life basically in Toronto here. Now, what is it that we can do for you as a community? How can we help you? What is it that you're looking for? What do you need? How do we help Knia Singh?
And can I add to that question?
Sure.
As far as like what's next for you, and what and I guess how we could, or people can be a part of that, because I mean, I'm listening to you here tonight and very inspired. And I can only imagine people who are listening or will be listening to this who have that little activist, I don't know, gene in them or whatever it is, or little bug or something like that, that just has, or there's something that they want to do, or, maybe not even as an activist, just people who actually want to be a part of something. And I think listening to you, what's coming across is you're someone that has recognized situations and gone for it each and every time. Like it's, you've made a decision, but, and so I can only imagine other people and who people are not even listening to this show are inspired by you. So what advice do you have for them as well? As far as just tying it into, how they can help, maybe directly with you or indirectly, and along your journey from now moving forward.
In my opinion, the best way they can help is by taking care of themselves, taking care of their families, expressing to young men and women who are involved in criminal activity or potentially criminal activity to stay away from that. And it's not cool to be, it's not cool to just always speak broken English, and it's not cool to drop out of school and to smoke weed all day. Like by holding our community to a higher standard, that's how you can help me, because that's all I try to do every day. I try to help represent us in the best possible way, because there's already so many negative things against us and so many negative stereotypes. I just want to see our community do the best they can and have pride in themselves and be proud of who they are, and be more than the stereotypes that have been placed upon us. They can help by joining the Caravana Arts Group, because in this 50th year, we're going to need as many members as possible to join us and to fight for what's right for the community. And speak up. Like, speak up when something goes wrong. If you've been abused, if you've been targeted, speak up and contact a lawyer. Contact me, contact OSI, the Osgood Society Against Institutional Injustice. Contact BADC, the OIPRD, and just hold the system to account. I think a lot of reasons why we don't progress and why we're always held down is because we allow the system to make the mistakes they do without holding them to account. So spreading the word, the next time I run, come out and volunteer, because I want to get in so I can help more people. I want to get in so I can be a voice for the voiceless. So when we don't vote, we don't allow that to happen, or we don't help, we don't allow that to happen. So yeah, like things like that, very practical things. There's nothing huge. It's all about base level. Like the young ones, don't fight in front of the young ones. Don't swear in front of them. Teach them badness or dress them up like little gangsters. Like, it's not funny, You give them a book to read. You tell them how important it is to be proud of yourself, to be articulate, to express yourself. Those are the things that help me, because then I don't have as much work to do, and I can actually do things I enjoy, like listen to music and read books and do other stuff, instead of always having to jump up and fight against the system. So yeah, really just be responsible adults and youth, and just help make our world a better place.
And how could they, the community get involved? I mean, contact you. When is your next campaign? We know that liberal government just came in. We don't know, what is your political aspirations? How do we get involved with that? I for one will most happily will drive from Oakville to Scarborough to help you out, so you can count on me. But how can anybody else help you?
Well, thanks. Pay attention, I guess, 2018. I don't know what status is going to be then, but I could potentially be running again for a seat in Toronto in 2018. I'm not sure where, but it all depends. If somebody from the province thinks that I'd be a good provincial or federal candidate and they want to appoint me, I would accept the appointment. But I can't go through these nomination races anymore because it's just a cultural battle and a race battle, and as long as our community is out of that, it's not going to be a winning one. So,
and it takes a lot out of you. I've seen it on all level, well, provincial and federal, and I've seen
it does.
that process, the nomination, even to be not like that, or to get that seat, to run. So not even run for the seat, but to be appointed. I mean, the steps the work that it takes, and I don't think people appreciate that as much because they don't really know behind the scenes, but it takes a lot out of a person. So yeah, I can understand why.
Yeah, it does. And I've ran a few times and I'm not getting the results that I think are warranted of, compared to the things I've done. So I realize it's not about what you've done. You can have 10 degrees and you can do everything in the world, but if ethnically you're not that race or you're not that religion, you might not get the seat. So I want to help transform people's view. I want people to start voting based on what the person brings, not where they're from. And
It's also, I find, having talked to other candidates and things of that nature, it's also popularity. It's like how popular you, even if you're not in that race, it's like that face recognition, and how to put that into, I guess into a positive. For lack of better.
I think so, because especially people who've been sitting in a seat, sitting in like for years and years and years, and so people get comfortable with them. But there are a lot of changes happening, right? Especially provincial, at the provincial level. There's like it's changing and rapidly, and I mean, depending on what side you're on, it could be kind of scary or it's exciting. And again, yeah, if we see you, it would be amazing to see someone that again, we can support based on not only you being someone we can recognize or relate to for certain reasons, but definitely listening to like all you've done. I have a couple of things because I saw that you and then I have a personal question after this, but I saw that you spoke recently or earlier this year, and the topic was celebrating Martin Luther King Day. And today I was reminded earlier, actually, and I was watching a documentary earlier this week about his assassination, and I didn't even know. I totally missed the fact that like he actually ended up in Toronto as part of his journey, his escape, right? So, but it's actually today is the anniversary of that. It's been 49 years since, and I saw that. I think that was the topic, and so I don't know how much of on topic you spoke about it, but what was that about, and what is your view? Because I mean, that's not an official holiday for us here. We do have listeners that listen in from the U.S., so and a lot of them I've told like friends and family that, and they're surprised. They thought the whole world celebrated on his birthday, Martin Luther King Day. But what was how were you involved in that speech, and what's your take on that, celebrating Martin Luther King Day?
Well, that speech was by invitation by a great gentleman named Jeffrey Johnson, who was the past president of the Rotary Club of Toronto. And They bring in speakers, and they're a philanthropic organization, and they put others above self, which is a model that I always go by as well. So what they had done, Jeffrey had been researching a speaker to bring in for Martin Luther King Day, and he saw all the activism that I was doing. And he called me and he emailed me and said, I'd like to know if you'd be interested in to speak at the Rotary Club. And I said, for sure, I'd love to. And we connected and arranged to speak. And I was there to speak about how, the whole reason why he wanted me there is he wanted me to explain how can we get to Martin Luther King's dream where people, regardless of race, religion, or color, can be together and people will be judged on their merits and the contents of their character, not the color of their skin. And when I spoke, I just spoke about my experiences. I spoke about how CFRB, in particular, radio host John Moore, has always invited me onto his show. He's a white man and he's, popular and he's known as a conservative radio station, but he recognized my voice. And because I had brought some policing issues to him way back years ago, and he's put me on, and that he's seen all the stuff I was doing with carding, and he just liked how I presented myself and what I had to say, he started inviting me just to speak about general topics, not just about race issues. So he's given me an exposure on Canada's largest radio talk show. And I said, he never had to do that, but that's how we break down these barriers. When people in positions of power provide venues or avenues for others, regardless of their race, just because of who they are, just because of their content of their character. And I just spoke about experiences like that. I spoke about my carding experiences just so the audience could understand, because there wasn't many African Canadian faces or West Indian faces in the audience. And they're very influential people. But they had never, I'm not saying they never, but it's rare that they hear these type of stories in depth, up close and personal. And when I was able to share my experiences with them, they quickly connected and they realized that, maybe the images that we see on TV or the assumptions we make about people aren't always true. And that was really the purpose, to just break down those barriers. And, I have a great relationship with Jeffrey. He's a gentleman and a scholar. And since then, I've had a few more meetings, but it's what's happened is people are doing research, and because of my presence online, they're contacting me, and which is a great thing, because again, Jim Rankin and Patty Windsor are a perfect example. Again, these are non-Black journalists who took up a cause to speak about race issues and policing and discrimination because they feel that it's worth speaking about, and because they've spoken about it, and because they've researched and written and took hard stances, they've actually helped solve a problem. Now we have regulations that protect us more. Now we have a conversation about this because they took the time to make it an issue, whereas they could have just shut their eyes and continued about their business and not cared, because it doesn't affect them the same way it affects you or me. And that's when humanity is really working, is when people of all races and colors strive for what's right, regardless of whose religion it is or who ethnicity it is. So that was what that whole Martin Luther King speech was about.
Who do you credit? Okay, this is the personal question. And then I have another big one, but I'm sure KINETIC has something to say too. But who do you, and I'm sure there's not just one person, but you've talked about this support you've gotten from your parents, your grandmother. You've the professors, fellow students, your dean, even. Where do you credit this discipline you have, this perseverance you seem to have? Like you seem to be able to apply to these things, and this drive to just and I want to say even this I guess confidence that you see something, you recognize something needs to be done, and you feel confident enough to stand up and do it. Like, we're looking back, where do you see that coming from?
I definitely see it coming from my early years. Child until I was 7, for one. I was the first grandson of a big family of women, so I was the only boy and child for years. So I got showered with a lot of attention and support. I think that gave me a good foundation to feel comfortable with who I was. But my mom reading to me at a young age and my dad being there um, gave me a really solid foundation. Now, things fell apart for me after the age of 12 when my father was assaulted and injured and paralyzed, and things went downhill from there.
Wow.
In the sense that the family structure started to crumble. But because I was given the foundation from early, it kept me going. And I started to realize that not everybody has that luxury of having good family and support. And not everybody, sometimes you're just born with a certain personality, such as patience or caring. And I realized that not everybody does that. So I said, if I have these qualities, I need to share them with people, because life is short, and you can't, if you're gifted in some way, you can't just use those gifts for yourself, because then it becomes selfish and it becomes self-serving. And everyone has their own special gift, and you have to be able to complement each other. So when I realized that I was lucky that I can grasp concepts fairly quickly, that I could communicate with ease, that I don't get mad very quickly, that I have a lot of patience, and I just try to apply them as much as I can, because God forbid I get a brain injury or something happens where I can't walk or do anything. I don't want to say I wasted time and I could have done something.
Could have, yeah.
Right. So I've just learned to accept who I am and just always put my best foot forward in anything I do. And I credit that family, to my friends, but yeah, mom, dad, and grandma, like they were really constantly there. So I'm lucky, because I know a lot of people don't have that. So
definitely,
if I do, I try to share it.
Well, thank you. Okay, and here's, I mean, just listening to you and just how you speak and just what you've done so far. Canada's Obama, or Ontario's Obama. Have you ever heard that? Does that
I've heard.
I swear I mean, I'm sure I can't be the only one thinking that after listening to you or talking to you.
I've heard it a couple times. At my last one of my debates, came up to me, says, "Has anybody ever said that you're like Obama?" I said, "Oh, you." Once I was in an elevator when I was canvassing, and then I said hi to a lady in the elevator, and she said hi, and then I gave her my card, like the election card, and I said, "Well, for city council, you can take this and you can read about me." She goes, "Oh, I thought that was Obama you had in your hand." Yeah, I've heard it, and
yeah,
I think it's just because when you're patient and you explain yourself and you're reasoned, I guess Obama's our best example of someone who's done that, especially a person of color.
definitely.
There's a lot of us out there. We just don't get the exposure. And then there's a lot of us out there, but some of us just don't have the confidence to know that you can be that way and still be cool, because everyone wants to be loud and wants to say the coolest, the funniest things, or the most, eyebrow raising things.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what it takes nowadays, people think.
Right.
Attention.
Exactly. Yeah, well, thank you for that compliment. That's a great one.
No, definitely. And do you see yourself, are you, I know you're heading towards practicing law. Do you see yourself politically still pursuing that in the future? And do you see yourself reaching that level? I mean, can you see yourself?
Yeah, I will still keep striving. I'm happy to know that even though I haven't been elected, that people respect my opinion, and the newspapers and the media call me and ask me what I think. And that basically says I'm influential without being elected, which I'm happy for. Law is a passion because I care about how laws are administered, but my true passion is broad social change. So I think politically is a better way to achieve that. But law is also very important to know and understand. And there's a lot of our people out there who are not being treated fairly by the system. So I'm glad to intervene when I'm able to assist. So I plan on practicing both. Like, I plan on practicing law as I can, but my ultimate goal is to be in a position where I can affect broad social change, whether that's an elected official or whether I'm appointed to a position. Anyway, I just want to help make our country better, and I want to ensure that Indigenous communities well respected, and that all people, the world, like my real ultimate goal is to get back to Africa and help solve a lot of the issues there, because there's so many resources there, the most richest continent on the earth, but yet at the same time the poorest. So it's just a broad, it may be, people may say it's like a dream or just too broad, but for me there's no limit. I just do what I think is right and strive.
Well, you know what? I guess this is a good point to kind of break away, and if we can we I'd love to have you back, because we've only scraped the surface of Knia Singh. Like, we haven't even gotten into the content because we thought our time was limited. And we know you're very busy.
Half an hour. It's 2 hours later, but it's all good.
Yeah, right.
Definitely worth it.
Yeah. So I we'd love to have you back if that's possible. Maybe we can go a little more in depth and be I guess better prepared and to dwell further into.
I'm sure there'll be more
Knia
reasons
Singh.
to have you back too in the future. So
To have an update of we'd love to have an update about what's happening. With the initiative that you're getting involved with, that you kind of mentioned, and when you're able to speak on that, to highlight that and make people aware of that, as well as any updates on what's going on with you personally.
I would love to, anytime.
Now, can we get it? Can you basically? We touched on it, but we never got to it. How do we get in contact with you? What social media forums are you on, or platforms are you on? And if we need to acquire your services,
Yeah, best thing, the way to get me, Facebook is Knia Singh, KNIA SINGH. Instagram's Knia Singh, KNIA SINGH, and then Master Knia, and then I'm not sure what other. I'm not
your website,
Snapchat yet, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah, your website.
Website, yeah, kniasingh.ca, www.kniasingh.ca. And
phone number if you'd like to provide it.
Phone number.
What? Oh, I thought you said for your wife.
Oh. That's what it's.
No,
I'm sorry. Did that sound like
that?
that?
If you'd like to provide
I know.
I shouldn't give my phone number just because I might just keep getting calls. But if you Google my name and look up my law firm, find it. Defense is the law firm that I'm articling with. But email, once you go on my website, my contact info is there. Email is fine. Knia Singh, Knia@kniasingh.ca. That's KNIA. So Knia@kniasingh, SINGH.ca. You can send me an email, and then from there, if we need to, let's provide a number. And then when I get my law firm up and running on my own, once I get called, then everyone can have access to that number.
Big things.
Okay. And is there anything else that we may have missed that you think you'd like to highlight before we close?
No, but when we talk again, we'll talk about food. Because I always talk about eating, proper, healthy eating. All I can say is don't eat artificial flavors or colors or artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's funny, we touched on that with one of our past guests recently about his change, and he's gone vegan now. I follow him, so I've been seeing him posting his vegan meals. And we're just, but that's a whole other topic. And for sure, we would love to have you back in the future, especially like Kinetic said, when you can speak more on other things you're working on that are in the works now. And if you are running next year, that would be a big reason to have you back. But definitely, thank you so much for making the time. With all that you're juggling right now, I appreciate it. The listeners appreciate it. Anybody who's listening who missed most of the show or the beginning, remember you can catch it as a podcast. It will be up on most of or all of the major ones anyway. LinkedIn. Sorry, not LinkedIn. Sorry.
I was about to say what?
I'm sorry, something's on the screen. Oh my God, you know these little ad pop-ups. Okay, sorry. Tune in radio, that's one. And iTunes, Google Play Music, of course, SoundCloud, and YouTube, and there are a few more. Just my Instagram at Cake with Kiersey, and you'll see everything listed there if you check the posts. And KINETIC is at
Kinetic 100.
iKinetic100. Best place to follow him. Yeah, and again, we're live every Tuesday nights, vexradio.com, and you can also check out all the posts there as well as a bunch of other good stuff. So again, Mr. Singh, thank you. Or
No
Master Nia. I want to ask you where that came from too, but we'll get into that in the future. But
Yeah, next time, part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Thanks again for making the time.
Okay, thanks, Kinetic. Thanks, Kiersey.
All right. Appreciate you.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Peace. Good night.
Peace. So 1 year down. I think it was a good show.
I almost yeah, this was the perfect show to celebrate our 1 year anniversary. I think all of our guests have been amazing to date, but I think when we have someone who's homegrown and doing amazing things for our city, I think
Dominant, yeah.
definitely happy to highlight. And I'm telling you, no, we're going to be able to boast one day, like, yeah, we had him on our show. I interviewed him. I'm sure. I know you cut out at one point, but I had mentioned to him, I don't know if you heard that part, but I said, had he ever heard or been called Canada's Obama? So that's where that whole discussion, because I know you had cut out. So, but now I see us, hey, or there's so many ways you can change. You don't necessarily have to be the leader of a country to make changes, as we see happening in other countries right now. Being the top dog don't mean nothing. So in some cases, but definitely this was a great person to have tonight. And what's that?
Sorry, out of curiosity, as we speak on the 1 year, what was your favorite show? So many of them. We did 52 weeks.
Nia is still listening this one. No, I'm kidding. No, like he cares. It's hard to pick though, and you know why it's really hard is because it has changed even over the year. Like we always highlight, we went from just being like we've changed. We've had different co-hosts since the beginning. We have changed the format. I mean, the longest running co-host other than us two would have been Miss Super Nerd. She was on for a while, and we had great shows with her. I mean, and we've had moments which were just crazy in the first year, which are still documented and can be seen or listened to if you check them on vexradio.com. But I really love and this is kind of one of my personal passions, is finding out more about people and what they're doing, what inspires them, how they keep pushing through. Because anything, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're like tonight, you're involved in social activism or political movements, it takes a lot to keep going, especially when you may not get the recognition that equals all the work that you put out there. So it's interesting to speak to people and to be inspired by them. And I'm sure the guests we've had so far this year will inspire different people in different ways. So I'm happy with these ones, and I'm very proud too. What about you? What has been your favorite or your, I don't know, faves?
I think, what, I can't pinpoint a favorite, but I think if I
okay. Oh Lord.
I think, what, like my favorite fun one was the one we talked about, the cuffing season.
Yeah, because you know what is crazy to me is how you say cuffing. Yeah, I remember how you say it. Yeah, the cuffing season. Yeah, that was jokes. Yeah.
That was my fun. I really enjoyed myself. It was jokes. to know,
Yeah.
and like I even laughed about an hour towards just thinking about what we were saying, and
And broke down the
just
rules of
talking about the
cuffing.
rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and I think that was my fun one. The
Yeah.
one I think I was most proud of was the one with the
Farm
Jamaicans
worker. Yeah.
that got yeah.
Yeah. Farm workers. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that
And that
one.
was last year, and
I
that was a
think as
great, great panel. That was a great group of guests too. That and
right,
mhm.
it touched on some very so it touched on some social issues that needed to be highlighted because we took for granted, these workers and they got burnt out, and just just the whole series, both of those shows
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
were I was proud of those shows.
Definitely. Yeah,
Um, just
those were big
that
ones.
and
Yeah.
stuff of that nature.
Hmm.
And
And just
yeah,
feeling like, and I think we may have helped in some way, like exposing it and the fundraising that was
yeah,
going on. And I know personally, like I had mentioned it to people, and people saw it and heard about it, never didn't know anything, all the conditions that they work in, and um, were moved to do something. So yeah, I think we did something. So that, yeah, something to be proud about.
and I think the last it was tied both with Jamal Finkley.
Oh yeah.
That last one it was kind of neat where he kind of showed us on the
Yeah, the
live
live, yeah, on the
carpet.
red carpet. Yeah. Yeah, you
Just
got
getting
some good ones.
just
Yeah.
getting the insight with him. Yeah, like that was I like that one as well as Keith Hill Jr. when we
Yeah.
spoke about the book and just I mean those were a close tie for me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, you know what, and if I had to throw in one too, I mean, um the one with Mark Storer, that
Stoddard. Yeah.
Stewart,
Yeah.
that,
Stoddard. Like, yeah, again.
that part of my family, that was a really interesting one as well. So I niched those three into, so
Mhm.
the ladies that we were talking about, in terms of the music book.
The hook.
That
Hmm.
I enjoyed that one as well.
Hmm.
So I mean that was this year, but over the year, those three kind of like were important. But if I had to narrow it down,
Yeah.
I mean it really made bearing. It was just fun. Was the cuffing season?
Cuffing.
I think
Yeah.
if I had to pick one, it was my favorite show. That
Yeah.
was the most fun. We laughed, we argued, we
Yeah.
debated,
Oh Lord, we
it was
did a
just one
lot
of
of
those
that.
complete shows that was just, yeah,
Yeah, we did a
we
lot
had
of
fun. And I
arguing
think
and
that was probably,
debating on all those shows. It's crazy. But yeah, no, that was a good one. That was a good
yeah,
one. But yeah, it's been a
yeah,
good year. And I
you know,
think I know we had something else in mind, but again, being able to capture our guest tonight was dope. And we do have another guest lined up for next week, which is someone, again, another local person, Toronto, who actually I won't, yeah, I guess I could say, well, no, you're gonna have to wait. Just follow follow either one of us, and you'll see the post coming up sooner than later. And again, at Cake with Care C, iKinetic 100, both on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter, and there's a Facebook page, and we'll be posting there, and vexradio.com for sure. Check Vex for so much more than Cake as well. You get like updates on everything happening, everything that you need to know about, and you get to see other radio shows and other highlights of things that's going on, and great music. So yeah, check it out. If I don't have it in front of me, sorry.
well, you know
Okay,
what?
yeah.
I just want to say, I just think if before we close,
Yeah.
over the year, I just want to shout out, Miss Super Nerd. I want to shout out, Devon, forgot the last name, as well as our other guest.
Sometimes they
If you
say
can help me
Jones.
out
I
there.
think it's Devin Jones. Yeah. Nettie
Yeah,
Nice.
Devin Jones,
Nettie
and as
Nice
well
was
as
around.
Natty Nice that was on. Yeah,
Miss
a
Loretta,
couple of shows,
Miss
and yeah,
Loretta is doing her own thing right now. She's doing her uh LA Thomas hair, but she joined us for a couple of shows. shows, and I like her take on things. And Forever Blessed. Forever Blessed was with us for a couple of
Everybody's
shows.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
she's on Instagram posting like crazy. She's doing a lot of events and things right now. So she's out there doing her thing. And yeah, they help make it interesting. I feel like I keep feeling like I'm forgetting someone, but I think that was it.
No, I think you covered the major. We had a lot of guests and one-off guests and things of major, but those were the prominent co-hosts, if you want to say, and and then there was two.
And thank you, Kinetic.
Well, it was a mutual thank you. I appreciate you having me on. It's fun,
Yeah.
Haven't been on air in a while, and I missed it. So
Yeah.
it was a good look both ways.
For
I
sure.
appreciate you reaching
Sure.
out and and we doing providing this
Reaching
platform,
back.
making it happen, and putting up with my
Mm.
putting up with my busy schedule.
Mm-hmm. And the results
My
of that.
my
Yeah.
timely entrances.
Yeah. But guess
and
what? Your mic
and
was
paying
pretty
out to
good
the,
tonight. It was pretty good tonight. You didn't chip out as much, so that's a
yeah,
good
right.
sign. And
Shout out that internet company that's not blanking me out. I guess we had nothing controversial to say.
there you go. I was actually going to get in because I thought we were going to have a shorter time with Knia Singh that going to get into the whole anniversary thing and find out how important anniversaries are to people. Like if someone forgets, or do you celebrate all the time? So we'll save that for another show because that'll still be relevant. That'll be one of our
Right.
questions we'll bring in the future. That's a segment we will be adding. So the show, like I said, we've grown, we've changed over the last year, and we have a lot more to we're going to be doing some more things. And so already there's 2 segments that will be added coming up. So stay tuned, follow us, listen in, and eventually I'm going to get you people to start calling in. And our guests, like lately, it's just been wanting to just listen to them and not knowing, we had that much time to invite guests tonight. That's the only reason I didn't do it tonight. But in the future, for sure, we'd love your comments, your questions, and you can tweet us or leave comments on our social media pages in the meantime, and let us know what you think. I take constructive criticism. My nephew actually gave me some after last week's show. Because he was, and I'll just be real with you people. This is it. He's like, yeah, it was interesting. It was cool, but like, you don't have to say, yeah, He's like, you don't have to say that as much as you say it. And I was like, I know, right? Because I forget, because his mic is right at my mouth, and I forget. Like, I'm just saying it just because I'm engaged in the conversation. That's what I do naturally.
Yeah.
But the mic picks everything up. So I think I cut it out a lot. So I'll ask him if he gets a chance to listen and see how I did. But anyway, I'm open to hearing it all, people. Just be nice about it. Anyway, another great show. Thank you. And we're here again next Tuesday, April 11th. I believe the date is, live to air at 9 p.m. I'm making some sacrifices because there's a dope show that came back on tonight, and I'm here doing this instead, and having to watch it,
Man, I can tell you.
and having to watch it
I
at
know
midnight.
I know
Right?
exactly what show you're talking about. And we can't promote it,
I'm
but
not promoting it. This is like,
yeah, but no, man, but it starts with a B.
what? Yeah, but I'm gonna be
a
I'm
PB.
watching. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Peanut
Yeah,
butter. Yeah.
I
No, I'm watching it at midnight though. I'll be watching it at 12 because I have to watch it. So I get it on one
yeah.
of the West Coast channels.
I was amped when
What?
that come back on. I was like, man,
What? And I was like, what?
that was one of my favorite
Tuesday at
shows. Like I was there.
9?
Yeah,
I was a little pissed,
right.
but whatever. Nowadays, who watches TV? You don't even watch. No one watches TV at
No,
scheduled
I'm
time.
on it. I'm on the net.
Exactly.
Real. I download everything and then I just
Exactly.
watch it on my way. Believe it or not, I know this is bad to promote, but I watch it
Don't
on my
even
way to
say
my
that.
destination. Yeah,
Oh
I do.
Lord. See, no, I have to watch my shows. I can't just
yeah.
listen. I gotta watch. But my sister, she's like, yeah,
No,
I
I
know.
know.
Last week, she's like, oh no, I watch it on. I record everything. I don't do commercials. I was like, oh, excuse me, like people nowadays. So
DVR,
I'm old
right? Yeah.
school. I'm old school. I'll be watching in a half hour. So yeah, I'll let you know how it was. Anyway.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I guess when we close, I just want to thank Knia Singh again for coming on.
Yes.
And as you said, you just visited his website at www.kniasingh.ca. You know, with him, I really appreciate him taking his time and so much time, especially that we were limited.
Mhm, mhm.
You know, I think it was an amazing show, a great way to start our year number
Second
2.
year, yeah. This is the first official
Yeah.
of the second year. So, yeah, it was a
Technically,
great
it was last
kickoff.
week at 12 o'clock, but we never
We
made it.
ended, yeah, we ended before
Yeah,
12, honey. So no, that was
yeah,
our
apologies.
last year show.
So you know,
New year, new things. New
I
year,
look
new
forward
things.
to
Okay.
I look forward to implementing all the new changes that we've talked about and adding, or not changes, but adding the segments that
Additions.
we've talked. Yeah, in addition to
Yeah,
making the show better, and hopefully the listeners will enjoy it. And you know what?
for sure, for sure.
Happy year number 2 to us. Let's go.
Yay. All right. Good night, all. Oh, and the phone
Peace.
number, sorry,
Oh,
just in
sorry.
case you missed it, to send a shout out or a request at vexradio.com. It is 1-877-469-3016. Choose option 1 to send a shout out or option 2 to request your song. Again, 877-469-3016, vexradio.com. Okay, have a good night.
Okay, quick care. See you. Peace.
Take care.